Hello and welcome to episode 9 of Table Podcast, the one with WarmaHordesMachine. So who have we got here today then? I'm Neil.
I'm Dan.
I'm James.
And I'm Daz. Nuss, buddy. Yeah! Sorry.
So we're all concerned that he's off nicking our hubcap somewhere. If I can't see him at any one time, it makes me nervous.
Fairly sure I'll rob my VCR. Sorry, every time I think of it, I still think of that Harry Enfield sketch. Hey, hey!
It should surprise nobody that Spuddy's not here because he's playing Guild Ball.
Yes.
Yeah. Or probably painting another team.
I think if you cut him, he would bleed Guild Ball.
Yeah, possibly.
So I guess we should get on with the kind of standard stuff. What's everyone been up to last couple of weeks? What hobby have you been up to since we last talked?
I can start. I being James. I've decided I will go to.
Everyone else heard that, right?
Yeah, I being James.
I am James.
Yeah. Well, I thought if I say I'll start. They don't know who it is, do they? We all sound the same as Northerners, apparently, don't we? So, pretty much full on painting Nurgle at the minute.
We're using painting in the loosest sense of the word here, though, right?
Full on washing Nurgle at the minute.
I'm going to say how much actual paint is in there.
I've yet to use a paint that says anything other than shade on the bottle. The bottle.
No, spray paint is a type of paint.
Yeah, true. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, pretty much it's a spray and wash job, just to get Aegon's in a month, I think now, less than a month.
It is a month, yeah.
I've sort of ummed and ahed about whether to go and not being shown Age of Sigmar, so I decided that if I do a Nurgle Demon army on round bases, I can use it in 40k. I can use it kind of in 30k. I can use it a lot more in 30k when the timeline progresses a little bit more. And obviously it works well as an Age of Sigmar army as well. So it's just doing Nurgle Demons. I've also been doing some Warmachine stuff, but I'll get onto that when we get into the main topic. But yeah, just pretty much Nurgle for me.
I'll crack on now. I'm going to follow him. I am Daz. Oh. I had a little child, so my time's mostly been spent
Highlighting that.
Yeah. Cleaning up after that. I didn't know projectile shit was a thing, but apparently it is. So just as a heads up, not good. Hobby-wise, Age of Sigmar, I'm enjoying playing it. It's getting better the more I play it. Trying to get an ogre army that I've literally had sat in the basement since Dan's last campaign.
Convenient that, isn't it,
Yeah,
Daz?
they're amazing now.
Amazing how Daz always just happens to have the latest filth sat in his basement. Like a couple of editions ago, it was, I've had Techless for years.
I have had Techless for years.
Yeah, he was just sat in my basement, and then it turns out he was really good, so I got him out.
Got him out, yeah.
Yeah, ogres have no motivation to build and paint ogres, but it turns out now they're really fucking good, so... Yeah,
Where's my 9th edition army? 9th edition isn't coming, is it? So it's going to have to be my Age of Sigmar army. Although I have got some Sigmarines, I might just do them. I keep calling them Sigmarines. Stormcast Eternals. I must stop doing that.
Yeah, I said last time, it just invites the comparison more.
Yeah.
They're both
Stormcast Eternals.
They're both obviously inspired by the same root thing. They're both inspired by Renaissance biblical art. But I'm not going to touch that. Well, I don't know. I don't think the Stormcast could have made them that much money because basically everybody's army's built out of just getting the starter sets, which is a huge amount of stuff and not that much.
Well, a lot of them. I haven't paid that much attention to the Sigmarites just because it doesn't float my boat. But aren't all the new kits not in the starter box? The last few weeks were.
Yeah,
they've all been stuff that's in the starter box, which you can now also build as something else in their kind of multi-kit stuff.
Slightly different weapon.
You can do a perfectly serviceable army with just stuff from the starter box, but it gets a bit dull. I want like the Judicators in mine to give me a bit more dimension to it.
Plus, they only need to sell 2 armies worth of Sigmarites to Australia,
and yeah, it's sorted, isn't it? That's why their share prices didn't go down this morning.
Yeah.
What else? Hordes and Warmachine. I've had 2 armies kind of sat down in the basement in various states of disrepair, which I've then purchased the battalion boxes for, but I'll go into that a bit more later. And that is pretty much it. Oh, I started a Mechanicum army as well for 40k.
I give it a week.
I've bought quite a chunk of that, I think you'll find.
That doesn't stop you.
You always buy a chunk. Buying it isn't a hobby.
This is why I've got a lot of stuff down in my basement.
That's it. Daz complains that he's lost army building from Age of Sigmar. That was his favourite part of the hobby, but buying stuff was definitely Daz's favourite part of the hobby.
I probably have at least a GW warehouse in my basement, if not more. It's shocking.
And for anyone interested, Daz's address is...
I don't think... Even if I had Daz's keys, I wouldn't go near there to try and nick it while there's projectile shit in the offing.
True.
Hey, that's my defence system.
I've been mainly doing Hordes, so I don't know if you want to talk about that now or...
I think we'll come on to that later.
Yeah.
That's kind of the main bulk of the episode. One thing we're going to be talking about our Hordes and Warmachine campaign that have been plastered all over Twitter and the blog for the last week.
Plus, you didn't start with I am Neil, so you need to redo.
You need to redo that.
Right.
Start that again. Cut it
Neil
out,
am I.
Oh, you're not Yoda.
No, it's Neil. It's me. I be Neil. I think you'll find.
I be Neil. Mostly this week I've been on my combine Irish.
Oh, you're being slightly racist. Well, sorry, statist. I
Don't count if it's Southern.
Okay.
Although that is pretty much the part of the country I come from.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, the straw hat gave it was a dead giveaway. So we're not going to talk about what else you've been doing then, Neil?
That's pretty much it. I had a massive clear out on eBay. I've got rid of shitloads
You had a
of...
massive hobby purge, yeah.
That really surprised me because you always said you never sell models because you'll come back to them, you'll want them, you'd always regret selling painted stuff.
Well, you see, it got to the point that I looked and I thought... Because basically I have 2 full Warriors of Chaos armies.
I don't understand the problem.
And I looked and I thought...
Sounds like you're too short of a perfect set of Warriors of Chaos armies.
If I keep these, I will never paint an Age of Sigmar army. Because I'll think about it, and then I'll look at these and I'll think, well, I've got an army. And I looked and I thought, even though the one was on cork, I thought, I'll never get around to rebasing it either. So it'll always be on square bases. And it's not, neither of them are particularly good armies, I don't think, for playing Age of Sigmar anyway. So I just thought, I'll get rid of everything. I say I get rid of everything, I've still got a shitload left. But I'll get rid of a load of stuff. And then it might give me the impetus to start something from scratch.
I can't come. I've been all the time you guys have been talking. I've been trying to think of a funny way to say I am down, and I'm totally tapped out. So I am down, and this I've mostly been doing Hordes. Really got my hobby juices flowing.
Is that what that mess is?
I've been really enjoying that. I'll talk about that more later. But that's been my hobby, painting that stuff really at the moment, and writing the background for the campaign that we're going to talk about in a little bit. Other than that, I've been not had much chance really to do much hobby since the last episode.
Any particular reason for that then, or?
I'm working a lot. I've got a lot of reading. I'm starting a training course in 2 weeks' time.
So you've been a grown up.
I need to do all the required reading for it. Yeah. So I've been having to read all that. So I haven't read the Age of Sigmar Quest for Galmaraz yet. I haven't read the
I've
last
still not
few.
read the first book.
Have you bought the second book?
Not yet. I was waiting. I knew if I bought it before I finished doing all the required reading, I'd have read that and not the textbooks. So I need to finish the textbooks, and then when I get paid on Friday, I will treat myself to the Galmaraz book and greedily devour that, so we can review that on a later episode. And I want to get the novel that comes with it that supports the same story. Read all that stuff. Find out who the Celestant Prime is, because I'm sure somebody will ask us who hasn't read the rest of the background.
It's Ferrus.
Sanguinius. It's Ferrus. How is that Ferrus?
You died first, so he's first in.
But yeah, that's basically it. Oh, and I suppose the other hobby thing I've been doing is putting the finishing touches on the campaign pack for an Age of Sigmar narrative campaign weekend next year. I think we can talk more about this on another episode closer to the time, but the details will soon be up on our blog. They're all on the Warhammer forum at the moment. It's called Ride the Lightning. It's the first in the Realm Wars series that's going to follow the narrative of Age of Sigmar, 13th to 15th of May 2016, I think, and it'll be a similar format to the narrative campaigns I've run in the past for Warhammer and for Horus Heresy, but using really it seems like Age of Sigmar lends itself to narrative, story-driven play more than anything else. So I'm hoping it'll get a few people there and they'll enjoy themselves.
Are you going to put any comp on it, or is it too early to say what you're going to do? Are you going to wait and see what comes out in the next few months and then decide. Or
I'm going to wait and see. At the moment, I've got very, very loose restrictions on what you can bring. Mostly
has to have the keyword chaos.
has to fit into this. It all has to share the same alignment keyword. So you either bring an order, a chaos, a destruction, or a death army.
Yeah.
We're doing a lot of playtesting at the moment and trying to experiment with allowing people to bring. Each war scroll has a maximum number of models based on the number of wounds each thing has, but other than that, it's quite freeform. I didn't really want to adopt the pool comp or wound comp or something like that. I wanted to embrace the idea of bring what you want, but we are doing a lot of playtesting to see whether that can be broken and see whether it's going to make it impossible to finish your games inside the allotted time, because that's the biggest driving factor. And if it turns out it's not working like that, then I'll probably adopt the pool comp that the tournament circuit are working on between themselves that Mo started. I don't really want to. I think that has its place in tournaments, but I didn't really want that in a campaign weekend. But if it's not working the other way, I'm open to change. I've also written 9. I say written. I've also ripped off 9 scenarios from 40k and 8th edition of Warhammer. That's called Fog of War in Age of Sigmar, because we don't have Maelstroms. I've written up tactical objectives, and it basically uses the 40k Maelstrom of War scenarios. Based on my universal wargaming principle of anything with tactical objective cards is automatically more fun.
Yes.
So we've been trying a few games like that as well, and they've been pretty good so far, so I think that'll be a big part of the campaign weekend. If we get enough people, I'm going to get a set of actual Age of Sigmar tactical objective cards printed up for all the entrants.
Are you going to draw them with crayon?
No, I'm going to get them printed up on business card stock.
Does this 37% work in the bedroom department? Have you tried taking tactical objective cards to bed?
I'm desperately trying to think about that.
That could be interesting.
Tactical objective now for storm the.
I don't fancy drawing one of the capture and control bits.
It's when he gets air superiority.
I want no part in the assault on Blackreach.
Smut.
So with that, maybe we should move on.
I think we may need to take a quick break first.
So that's the title for the...
Right, so Dan, Breath of the Mountain.
Yeah, it's cool. Sounds cool, right? Sounds ominous.
That's such a bad pun.
What?
Sounding cool from Breath of the Mountain.
Oh, it wasn't supposed to be fun. I literally picked the name out of thin air.
Yeah.
It has no basis in the existing background or anything.
It sounds like a minty flipping mint advert.
I just thought it sounded cool. Yeah, Breath of the Mountain, that you'll probably have seen plastered all over Twitter and the blog for the last week, is our upcoming Warmachine and Hordes escalation campaign. We're getting back into the game, or getting into the game for the first time, some of it.
Yep,
it's not just restricted to the hosts either. We've got a couple of other local club mates from the Leeds Night Owls joining us, and full details are on the blog of the campaign. We should probably explain, I suppose, if you've been living under a wargaming rock for the past 12 years, you might not know what Warmachine is. You might have heard people talk about it as the dirty secret of tournament gaming.
Yeah, dirty secret. I suppose best off start with the people behind it all, so to speak. Privateer Press. Privateer Press are the GW of America, to put it bluntly, aren't they? So to speak. They started up over there. They came up with Hordes and Warmachine. How many years ago now?
I think it's about
11 for about 10.5 for Warmachine and 9.5 for Hordes.
The Warmachine was out for a while before Hordes.
It was only a year, I think, because they had the 10-year Warmachine anniversary last year, and the Hordes was this year, I think.
Right.
But
yeah, Hordes was definitely this year. Yeah.
It's about a decade anyway.
Yeah.
It's been a while. Yeah. So I honestly can't remember exactly who started it up. It's been a while since I've gotten all of that stuff.
I know, I think. Well, don't know the exact names of all the founders, but it was created by people who, as far as I know, used to work in collectible card game industry.
Yeah, they were connected to Magic, weren't they, I think?
Yeah. And then they started by writing a world supplement for the old D20 role-playing game system, the Iron Kingdoms. I think that the Iron Kingdoms stuff started with a module that was where Alexia Cianor, the undead, not the undead, the woman with the witchblade.
Alexia
I know you
Norizen.
mean, yeah.
Yeah. She started in that, and that kind of started everything. And then they spun it out into making Warmachine. And I remember when this came out, I'm going to sound like a wargaming hipster here. Yeah, I liked it before it was cool.
So did I,
Because
actually.
it's so cool now, playing with the toy soldiers and dice. But I remember going into Travelling Man in Leeds when the first metal battle boxes had just come out for Warmachine, just for the original 4 factions. And that's actually one of their... I don't know whether to say innovations. I don't know if other companies did it, but it certainly wasn't as
I don't think anyone did
prevalent.
at the time, because there was no Malifaux or anything like that around at the time. It was... Not even GW had battalion... I don't think that GW had battalion boxes.
They did. They'd had them for a long time because they're actually a lost leader. Were battalion boxes for Games Workshop.
I don't know.
Yeah, but this is different. This was... It was a perfectly scalable game. If you bought a battle box, it was totally balanced against another battle box, and that was one Warcaster at the time, one Warcaster, and two or three,
jacks.
2 to 4 actually.
Depending on
2 to 4 Warjacks, which are your big steam powered robots. So they came out. I remember thinking it was great, buying some of them, playing it for a couple of weeks, and then it kind of went in the cupboard and I forgot about it for years. They kind of went from strength to strength. Hordes came out as well. They are 2 sides of the same coin. Warmachine is a game set in the civilized parts of their setting, the Iron Kingdoms, where you've got steam-powered magic robots called Warjacks.
very steampunk.
Fighting other steam-powered magic robots, being controlled by Warcasters, who are, I guess, wizards with special affinities for controlling robots.
Psychically connected to these robots.
Yeah. And then Hordes was their kind of sister game, where you're set in the outer reaches of the Iron Kingdoms. Yeah. So instead of having recognised nations, you've got druids and trolls, clans and tribes rather than nations and empires. And in Hordes, instead of having a Warcaster, you have a Warlock who's a wizard with a affinity for controlling big frickin' monsters. And war beasts in place of warjacks. So whereas a Signar Warmachine battle box will have had a Warcaster, a big heavy warjack with a big ass hammer, and a couple of light warjacks with guns and spears, the Trollbloods starter
They'd have
set.
had.
It's got a prophet sorcerer.
Troll axe, 2 troll impalers.
Yeah, so you've got 3 kind of light beasts.
Yeah.
And then their equivalent, they're kind of Scottish orcs in blue, the Trollkin sorcerer controlling them.
Well, not the way I paint them, but
but that kind of all work together, and then you can expand beyond that into getting units, getting individual heroes who can do things as well. But the key thing, I think, if you hadn't played the games, if you weren't aware, there is some confusion. It's a shame that they haven't just got one name for this game, because no one on the internet can seem to decide whether it's Warmachine and Hordes, HordesMachine, WarmaHordes. Everyone just wants to amalgamate it into one game, because it's played as one game. All of the tournament scene is one game, because the games are totally compatible.
WarmaHordes the one I hear most often.
Yeah.
Because it's easier to roll off the tongue.
Yeah, it is.
But they
Warmachine, yeah.
Warmachine?
Warmachine?
that's
I
the
don't
much
really
more
like those.
specialist
totally
website.
different. Don't search for Warmachine.
Certainly not if you're at work.
But yeah, I think there is some confusion there sometimes. We might be patronising people here if they're fully aware of it, but I think a lot of people aren't quite sure. Spuddy, for example, didn't realise that they are one in the same game, but the actual basic rule books for each will have slightly different rules in.
They are 2 individual games with 2 different sets of rules, but are perfectly compatible with each other. The best way I've always come up with it in the past is imagine if you could take your Warhammer Fantasy miniatures, back when it was Warhammer Fantasy, and could play them against your Space Marines. You could still technically
Isn't that what Age of Sigmar is?
Shh, explaining it. You can do that because Space Marines still had ballistic skill and all that stuff, as did your guys, and you could still run and charge and fight and do all that. You could do if you really, really wanted to. Crap, but Warmachines and Hordes.
Well, I'm sure that's
balanced.
a great analogy.
No,
because Warmachine and Hordes are designed.
No,
to play
they are
together.
designed to be played together. That's what I was going into, is the fact that it's that setting, so to speak. Well, that's the closest analogy for GW terms, except they're designed to be used that way. So basically, like I said, Age of Sigmar.
Yeah, they are. Really, the only difference, the core mechanics are the same. The way you move, the way you shoot, the way you hit something, the way you pick it up with your hands and throw it to somebody else to jump up and down on it. Those rules don't change. Yeah. The only difference is Warmachine is a game of resource management. Where you have a fixed amount of focus, which is magic points, which you can allocate to your warjacks to make them do more impressive things. And you've got that every turn, and it's about where you put those resources to get the best out of them. So the focus rules are in the Warmachine rulebook, whereas Hordes is a game of risk management, where your war beasts, you can have them do impressive things to build up fury magic points, and then you take them back off them. So where a Warmachine army is reliable in that you will always have, if your warcaster has got 7 points of focus, you'll start every turn with 7 points of focus, and you can have a plan for what you're going to do with that. But you can only use those 7 points across the army. Whereas in Hordes, if you've got a lot of war beasts, you could force them all up to their full fury level. You could run them all really hot and use 16, 20 points of fury. But then you've taken a huge risk, because the odds are you're not going to be able to control all of them next turn when you can't leech back more than your 7 points of fury.
Correct, yeah. Warmachine tends to be a bit more of, from my own personal experience, more of an attrition style set of forces.
It becomes better in later game.
Yeah, later game, because your jacks are still there, your caster's got more and more focus on them, so can defensively buff themselves or augment spells and stuff more often. Whereas in Hordes, as the beasts die, your caster's got less and less focus to deal, fury to deal with, so therefore becomes gradually weaker as the beasts disappear.
That's why I think Hordes is the better game. I think Hordes is a better system. Warmachine, they had to change the rules in Mark II and give you free warjack points to give you any reason to take the big steam-powered robots, because you were almost always better just taking loads of infantry.
It depends on the warcaster, doesn't it? But yeah.
But no, back then everyone,
with the exceptions of people like Darius, they kind of mechanic characters. Other than that, you're always better with the infantry.
Yeah.
Hordes, even back before you got free war beast points in Mark I, you still had to take the beasts because they were how you got your fury.
Yeah.
The way that keeping fury and focus points on your warlock or warcaster affects them as well, I think makes Hordes better. In Warmachine, if you've got 6 points of focus still on your warcaster, that adds 6 points to his armor. It makes him harder to kill because you're taking 6 points off every bit of damage you do to him. A warlock, if he's got 6 points of fury left on him, he can expend 1 point of fury every time you do damage to him to bounce that damage onto a war beast. So
he takes no damage at all. The war beast takes it.
So you have to take out the war beasts before you go for the warlock. You can't just bypass him and you can't just sneak around, hit him, and end the game, because almost every game
he'll have something sat on him ready to palm it off onto a beast. Yeah,
because that's something that might be different to non-Hordes and Warmachine players as well. Whilst there are scenarios, and a lot of the casters really shine in scenarios, if you kill your opponent's warcaster or warlock, that almost always ends the game and gives you an automatic win.
Unless there's some specific scenario rule saying otherwise,
yeah. Or you're playing a big enough game to have more than one warcaster or warlock. Yeah. But that was the failing, I think, of Warmachine, certainly in Mark 1, and why I still think that Hordes is better in Mark 2. You can't go for a first, second, even possibly third turn assassination run easily on a Hordes warlock, because they can just pass that damage off if you've not bothered to also hurt their army. In Warmachine, you can sometimes ignore the army altogether if you've got a good shot on the caster. Yeah,
I think it becomes less of an issue that when the players are better and more experienced.
Yeah, we're just
it's just learning from. You're only really going to let somebody cast to kill you the same way once or twice, and then you're going to keep an eye out for it, aren't you? But
now you've just mentioned that, the other thing about Warmachine and Hordes is all the rules for all your characters. Well, I say the rules, sorry. The special abilities are on little magic-style cards that you've got down on the table. And they've got the health on there, their stats, and then all their little special rules. And the problem is, all these warcasters, and each faction probably have 7 to 10 each, depending on the size of the faction and how new it is.
I think more than that.
More than that for some of the larger ones, yeah, definitely. But they've all at least got one rule which is unique to them, and one special ability called a feat, which they can use once per turn, which is
once per game.
Once per game, sorry.
You know what? If you want to let me use mine once per turn next time we play, I'm definitely bringing Epic K now.
That's why it does keep moving.
Sorry, once per game, and they are game changing to the point of where, well, I refer to the page 5 rule as they've got in there, where it's play like you got a pair. Everything is broken, therefore everything is balanced. And they are so the first time you get hit by one of these feats, you'll be like, what just happened? Because you'll probably lose.
there is an extremely steep learning curve.
Yes.
Extremely steep. But you do get, it does reward continued play, but you have to accept that you're not going to be good at it straight away. You're going to lose.
You will get... First time you play against a caster, you will probably lose because you won't see the trick or the feat or this synergy come out of nowhere and just...
Then you learn from it, you don't do it again.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is why it's good for us, because we're all starting at the bottom.
Yeah, the thing I'd say, though, your comment that it's all broken, so none of it is... I think there's this prevailing theory, because there are... certainly not the majority, but there is a vocal minority of Privateer Press fans who like Warmachine and Hordes because it is not made by Games Workshop.
Yes.
And that vocal minority despise Games Workshop. Now,
they're the ones that as soon as this came out, they were like, what do you mean I have to pay £25 for some gold swords? I'm off to play Hordes and Warmachine.
Yeah, now
pay £65 for some men on horses.
Yeah, I like them both. I like them both. I think I have complaints about both companies for different things, which is me ranting about that is a whole different podcast and far more negative than we would want to be on here. So we'll leave that for another time. But this is the thing. I think if you only looked at the internet, it seems like it's not possible to like Warmachine without hating Games Workshop and everything they stand for, and that is just because of a very small vocal minority of people that kind of get that idea across. But it's also the same people who insist that Warmachine is the perfectly balanced war game,
and it's cheaper than GW. If you listen to them, it's cheaper than GW. It's not at all.
That's one of the things Age of Sigmar's brought in, but it was cheaper to play a game of Warmachine or Hordes than it was to play a game of Fantasy. A lot cheaper.
Because you can play at smaller levels.
Yeah, exactly. It was much more scalable. It worked. Age of Sigmar, I've not played any really small games, and so I'm not sure, but I think that's what they aimed at. That's
someone brought a Forest Dragon. It was a quick game.
But yeah, I think now, from my experience, they're about on par. They're both quite expensive. They're both expensive hobbies.
You're looking, if you were to buy a full tournament, I think 35 points is a usual.
50 points.
35 to 50, depending on what it is.
At least two.
You can get a lot of crossover, but
you get a lot of crossover, but just to get one list, you're looking at probably spending between £200 and £300, depending on what faction you're going with and how many metal and plastic models they've got, and if you can buy these starter sets and blah.
And you can do it cheaper if you wanted, say, a lot of jacks or something like that.
But in the competitive events, we'll get into it a bit more later on. We'll go through it, but essentially you have two lists, and obviously you can have models that cross over between the two, but then you're essentially buying some stuff that you'll only ever use in one list, which then increases it by another couple of £100.
Yeah. That's one of my complaints is that you can't build an all-comers army really out of Warmachine. But then the tournaments are set up to work to
account for that.
But it's the thing is, it'll probably cost you the same amount to buy a Warmachine army as it would to buy a 40k army, but you'll have a lot less models in your Warmachine army.
40k army as well. I'd say probably like towards a 2,000 point 40k army.
But the thing I was getting at is that it's not perfectly balanced, is it? There are certain things that are better than other things.
Epic Denegra bent. Full stop.
In my opinion, I've played a lot of war games. Warmachine's the nearest to balance that I've found.
More so than
if you bring your two matchup,
Age of Darkness, Horus Heresy.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
because I think it is.
The rules.
I think Heresy is the most balanced Games Workshop game by a long way, but that's helped by the fact that 75% of the army is using the same stat line. But yeah, I think it's. But you're never going to get a balanced war game anyway.
No, you never will.
I mean that was kind of Games Workshop's approach to Age of Sigmar, wasn't it? It's impossible to balance it, so solid. We're not going to pretend to try.
But you could do with somebody at least putting a bit of effort in to keep it semi-balanced.
All right, let's not go on a tangent. There's a reason James hasn't been on any of the Age of Sigmar podcasts yet.
I'll just eat this sweet.
I think the thing with Warmachine and with Hordes is they are by far the tightest rule set out there.
Yeah.
If you can do something or if you can't do something, it clearly says it somewhere within the rules. There's no grey area. And if somebody does find a grey area, Privateer Press are very good at bringing out an errata to clear up that grey area.
Yeah.
And it's very much is written in a certain way, which means you can read it and understand what
their English
that
is
sentence actually means.
It's not even GW English where it's just like, well, if you put that comma there, it means an entirely different thing. It is actual proper.
Yeah,
I know it's bad English, but it's proper English.
It's done right, good English.
Done right, good English, isn't it? Yeah.
Proper, well, good English.
And I think that's what has lent it so much to being a tournament game, is because the rules are so tight that, I mean, one of the main issues you get with Warhammer Fantasy or 40k as a tournament game is you get people arguing about rules are written versus rules are intended. There's none of that in Warmachine. There are the rules.
Yeah, the rules written are as they were intended.
Yeah.
Well, that's nothing against GW because that's what they want to do with their game.
Yeah,
but
on the other hand,
and it works fine for
arguing the toss, arguing devil's advocate. GW's rules are a lot more digestible, a lot easier to read. Warmachine's rules, while part of what makes them so tight is they're extremely dry, and it can be a bit of a slog.
There's no fluff in there or anything like that. This is the rule.
Yeah.
So
that makes it a better written rule set. That makes it a more functional rule set. It just makes it a bit more difficult to actually read, I think. But you said so. That's what makes it such a good tournament game. That's what it is. That's what you say. Hordes and Warmachine, people immediately think, oh, it's tournaments, it's chess clocks, it's high pressure. So why are we doing a campaign?
You see, I don't think it is a tournament game because, as you say, it started off fully as background.
It started off as an RPG.
And I think when you look at it, the background to Hordes and Warmachine is probably as good as Warhammer Fantasy, if not better.
The story, because it is
a
progressing story, is the best background lore in wargaming, in my opinion.
It should also be said that there are the spin-offs of there is a role-playing game. It's still called the Iron Kings, isn't it?
Yeah, the Iron Kings. I actually quite want to try that. So they've done their own now that doesn't use the D20 system. Mm-hmm. It's a lot closer to their wargaming rules. Which
obviously, as soon as if you've ever looked at any of the backgrounds in any of the Games Workshop role-playing games, it adds an extra amount of background in there.
Dimension, doesn't it? It does a lot of what the Black Library does for Games Workshop. It adds background and depth to the world that's not just on the front lines.
So what you've actually got is you've actually got a really in-depth background that maybe to say it's ignored isn't really the right way of putting it, but you've got this really in-depth background that isn't necessarily needed to play these really tight tournament games.
No.
Whereas it's a real shame because the really in-depth background is, I think, what draws most of us to wargaming.
It's what's kept me, but I've bought every single Warmachine and Hordes book that's come out and read them, even when we were going through periods of 2, 3, 4, 5 years of not painting a single model for it. No one at the club playing it, not bothered to play it myself, but I wanted to see what's happening with the story because it got very compelling. And I think that's one of the good bits. And I think we probably will do an episode fully exploring the background for anybody. I don't think it's in the scope of this episode because
there's a lot of background.
Yeah, because it will largely be once again me talking for 2 hours,
if not more.
I mean, it might be nice to do a couple of factions in an episode and do the background that way as well. But just to break it down into manageable chunks and just a 20-minute chat about what each faction gets up to and what.
That's actually something to say for a game whose background is so good. It's not available anywhere but in the books. Yes. It's not summarised well on their website. It's not. There's no. I know that actually Lexicanum are doing a Iron Kingdoms page at the moment.
Yeah.
But it's not easily accessible. And even if you've got all the books, it's a lot to kind of chew through all the books to read what's going on and keep up to date with everything. And they've not pushed that as much as they could. So I think it will be. I think some people will get a kick out of hearing us kind of explain it the same way we did for Age of Sigmar, the same way we've done for. The end times, so we'll do the reading, so you don't have to.
Well, Dan will do the reading, so
yeah, and we'll all just listen.
Yeah, we should get that on a T-shirt. So, like I said, why are we running why are we doing it as a campaign, as a narrative campaign, rather than as a mini tournament or a league?
Because I'd smash you all.
Because you'd smash us all.
Well, your feet every turn, so you might well do. I think it's just because. As a group, we're all interested in the background. For me, the most interesting war games are war games that you play, and this is for any system, where you put. I mean, you don't write a full narrative, you don't write a book every time you play a game, but
hey, is that a thing? Because
I mean, when me and Dan play a game, usually we'll say, if we have a game of 40k, for example, we'll probably discuss why we're having a battle and what the background is, and it might be something as simple as. That crate in the middle's got something the Dark Angels want, and the Grey Knights think it's some demon.
Don't want them to have it.
Yeah, it's usually
you don't need to know what's in the crate.
It can be 2 sentences, but it's nice to have some sort of background to it,
and then it added depth to our games.
Yeah, exactly.
It's that investment, which I think is something we've talked about a lot before, haven't we? On various different systems, that's what invests you in the game. That's what makes you want to paint an army to the best of your ability. That's what makes you want to go out and collect models and maybe go, I'm going to buy that model. It's not the best model by far, but I want it
because it looks pretty.
Because it looks pretty and because it tells this part of the story.
You see, the background does that for me. I've never played with and I used to play a lot of Warmachine in Mark 1, a lot of Warmachine, a lot of Hordes, but this is like before I met any of you guys. We're getting on for probably about 8 years ago now. And I've never once played with a Warcaster or a Warlock whose background didn't grip me. That's why I wanted to play with them, because I wanted to have that avatar on the tabletop. It doesn't matter how good Epic Morvana is in the Circle Orbrus, which is the army I'm doing at the moment. I won't use her because Morvana comes across as an insufferable bitch in the background. I don't think you're supposed to like her. I'm not sure. If you are, then I think that's I've either totally read it wrong or it's badly written in the first place. But I cannot stand that cow. So I don't care how good she is. I don't care how good the model is. I wouldn't put her down the table because I'd just be trying to get killed every turn.
Yeah, it's fair enough. There's a lot of background stories where characters do come across like that. So, yeah. Sorry, I'm just rambling now.
That's why I have started 8 Gaunt's Ghosts armies over the years. It never gets past the first couple of models, but I read the book. I read the latest Gaunt's Ghost book, and I'm like, oh, this is great. I want these characters. I want these models. I want to represent them on the tabletop. And then the reality of painting a light infantry Imperial Guard army sets home and they get put back on the shelf again.
Mm-hmm.
So the Breath of the Mountain is our narrative campaign. We're doing it as an escalation type event. So we're starting off with 15 points, then we're playing 25 points, then we're playing 35 points. And then we'll see how it goes, because we're realistic in the fact that we don't tend to stick to very long-term campaigns. So a 3-month campaign is enough to hopefully keep the momentum going. And there's I've written some background for the Breath of the Mountain, tried to do it in the same sort of style as the Warmachine books, where it's all written in narrative rather than describing what's happening. It's all through the eyes of people on the front lines, and that's being released every day been released daily on our blog, and I'll probably summarise it at the end as well to be able to get that. But in brief, there is a particular mountain on the borders of Rule, the Dwarven Kingdom, Ios, the Elven Nazi Kingdom, and Lael, the occupied French kingdom. And some, for various reasons, all the factions we've got are just coincidentally only the factions we wanted to play have all been drawn to this mountain. I won't go into too much detail here because it's all written down, so I think you hopefully get a better experience reading the short background section than having me rattle it off here, or read it as an audiobook like we did in the last episode. But that's why they're all fighting there. It is very loose background. Really, we're going to tell the story ourselves through our games, and then that'll get updated each month as I kind of develop the background and say, well, these guys all won games this month, so this is what's happening now. So I guess we should, similar to what we did for our 30k episode, maybe go around the table and say what armies you're going to play, why, what's attracted you to them, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I am James. Do you want to start?
I be James.
I be James. We get you that on a t-shirt.
Yeah. So I mean, I think myself and Daz were probably the first two to get back into Warmachine a couple of months ago, and I instantly picked up sort of, I don't know, the wife's not listening this year, so 350, 400 quid for retribution.
Oh, that's like £17.50 in wife pounds.
Well, yeah, exactly. So I've obviously still got my retribution, and then about a month and a half later, we decided that we were going to do this escalation campaign. So I thought, well, I'll do something new to buy a few. Well, the plan was buy a few bits of that, 15 points worth, paint it up, buy some more. But then I bought everything that's out for Pharaoh. So
what are the Pharaoh, James?
Pharaoh are pigmen, like beastmen, pigs. Only a small sub-faction of minions. So minions are in Hordes. You've got your 4 basic factions. So you've got Legion of Everblight, which are your dragon worshipping elf,
elf, ninja, frost elves who are worshipping a dragon.
Yeah,
you got your sex with Tyranids.
Yeah, well, that sort of look, Tyranidy look. Yeah. And then you got your troll bloods that we've discussed, which are your trolls. Sort of.
They're kind of the protagonists of the settings. Yeah.
Scorn are your, as far as I can see, Scorn remind me of sort of Easterlings from Lord of the Rings. I think
they look like Chaos Elves.
Yeah,
They look a bit like
very a bit corny and a little bit.
Easterlings if they were into S&M.
Yeah, kind of that sort of look. Who am I missing?
the Circle Orberus,
You can
who
discuss
are clearly the best, who are
Trio
druids, basically. Yeah. They're not pansies though. They're quite happy that they're going to bring about the apocalypse eventually.
And then you've got minions, and with minions, there's two small sub factions. You've basically got crocodiles, or you've got pigs.
And they're basically like mercenaries, aren't they? They'll work for other factions, or can be played on their own.
Yeah. So I've gone with the pigs. One model was what drew me to them, which was Helga the Conqueror. One of the newer Pharaoh models. Some of the older ones that were around, I assume they were from sort of the early days of Hordes. They're pretty awful, like the Brigands and stuff. But some of the newer models, and they seem to be getting a little bit of love recently with quite a few new bits and pieces. So I thought I'd pick the Pharaoh up. The biggest reason I went for them was the rule Bacon. That was it.
Bacon, yeah.
Where if you kill one of the war beasts and you're in base contact with it, you heal yourself because you basically eat the pig. And that just drew me. And also, the most fun I've ever had playing fantasy all 40k was pretty much with orcs. And they're kind of that faction for...
Yeah, they're a bit zany, a bit crazy.
Yeah.
They've got these weird and wild...
And they're pretty weak, and I've got a bit of a fetish for playing weak armies. What I like to do is find the faction that's not played that often, that's seen as quite weak, and then I feel like I can take whatever I want
for losing.
Yes, well there is that, but also I feel like I can take what I want. Whereas if I take one of the forces that's seen as like the power build, and say Haley 2 is the model that I really like, so I use Haley 2 all the time. It looks like I'm playing Haley 2 because she wins a lot.
Yeah, I totally sympathise with that because that happened to me with my Demon Prince in 8th edition Warhammer.
Oh yeah, of course it did.
The first or second one?
First one. I built the Demon Prince back when Demon Princes were shit, and I just wanted a nice big centrepiece for my Warriors of Chaos army. Then the new book came out, and they were friggin' awesome, and I rejoiced. But then everyone else had a Demon Prince, and like, oh, you've got another one with a Demon Prince, aren't they? And once more, I sound like a wargaming hipster again, going, no, I had a Demon Prince while they were still shit.
Yeah, but yeah, no. So like the models, like the background's pretty basic because I mean the sort of pigs that go around and pick fights with people, but yeah, I like the models, like the characters in there, and they've got a few special rules. And also the main guy Carver, who's sort of the chieftain of the pigs, really. He's got a weapon called Hand of God, which is Hog. So therefore,
what's it? You want to give him his full name though, James?
I think it's Lord. I don't know it off the top of my head. It's Lord Carver,
BMMD,
the bringer of
most massive
destruction, Esquire the Third. I think it is. But yeah, it's a good name.
Pig knows his shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, which warlocks are you going to take? Because in the campaign you can have two and a third that is a wild card. You can use them once over the course of the campaign if you fancy something.
I'll be using Carver, Dr. Arcadius, and Helga, but I haven't decided which two will be the main two. I feel like Carver should be in there as one of the main ones because he's kind of the head honcho and a lot of the background's about him, and I think he was the original Pharaoh caster. But because he's the original Pharaoh caster, his rules are very basic. He plays very much like a beat stick. He doesn't really do much in the way of... Well, he has a lot of buffs, but he's very simple to use, and he's got very simple mechanics, whereas Dr. Arcadius and Helga are a little bit more subtle. So I don't know whether I'll use them yet, but
should also be said that Dr. Arcadius isn't a pig, is he?
No, he's basically the human that... Because the other thing that the pigs like is they're basically a cross between pigs and Iron Hands. They like to put on bionics and
yeah, having 12-foot tall monster pigmen wasn't enough for them. They thought, what if this 12-foot tall monster pigman had robot arms?
Yeah. So he's basically, from what I know of the background, which isn't a huge amount at the minute because we're only really getting into it now, is he basically went to Carver and proposed that he could sort of build these bionics for the Pharaoh, and so he's kind of an outsider to the pigs because he's not a pig, but he's one of their warcasters, and he counts basically as part of their faction. So, and I mean, I've bought them all, so I can pretty much use whatever I want. But I think it'll be two of those three, and then the other one will just be the wild card. What are you using, Daz?
I'm going to be using Scorn. Best way of describing Scorn are kind of sadomasochist type dark elves that like to torture and capture animals.
Yeah, but they've like James said, they've definitely got an Eastern. They've got a kind of
Oriental,
generic Orient look to them, haven't they?
They look Oriental, but they're Dark Elves.
I still think Chaos Elf is better than Dark Elf.
Yeah, Chaos Elf might be a good
because they're kind of spiky. Their faces are a bit spiky.
They're a bit spiky.
Cultist Slanesh.
Well, they're obsessed with they know what happens on the other side. They know what happens when you die, and none of them want that. So they're obsessed with either like making the most out of today or achieving immortality by binding their souls into stones. And
so where did they learn about Silicon Heaven?
There's no Silicon Heaven.
Don't say that.
Where would all the toasters go?
Oh.
As far as I can remember, one of their ancestors crossed over to the other side and came back or got word back to them or something. So they've been told by a dead guy, it's not great. Don't go rushing into glorious death. Make the most of your life or achieve some kind of immortality.
Yeah. Okay.
So like I said, they tend to, instead of a lot of the other factions tend to breed their beasts or make them, as in the case of the hogs and stuff, or generally they're just giant mutated versions of themselves. These Scorn tend to just capture them. So they'll be wandering through the desert and they'll go, oh, I like the look of that. Looks pretty fierce. We'll catch that, tame it. If we don't tame it, we'll just whip it until it goes in the general right direction of the enemy, and hopefully it'll rip some faces off on the way there.
Yeah, they're not nice, are they?
No.
They're not kind.
They're not kind to their animals at all. If their animals die on the way in, great. That means we didn't. All fantastic.
I think they're quite Roman as well. If you read the background for them and look at some of the naming,
like the whole phalanx and shield walls and stuff like that.
I suppose the thing to say for them from a background point of view is they actually are a nation, unlike everything else in Hordes. But they're not in their power base. They've crossed the desert to attack the rest of the Iron Kingdom's outlying parts. But the Hordes, the Scorn are actually a drilled training army rather than a
I'll tell you who they remind me of. I can't remember his name, but the guy in 300 in the movie. Xerxes, because it's that sort of faction where it's
Persian.
Persian type
look.
look.
They are an empire, aren't they?
That's quite And there is actually a Warcaster called Xerxes.
Well,
yeah. So spelt differently, but that's who I'm going with. The main reason I got drawn into them, two things. It wasn't the casters like Dan was on about that drew him in. It was actually the beasts that drew me in for the Scorn. Unlike a lot of the other factions, like I said, the beasts tend to look like the faction they're from. So, like I said, the hogs are all
have
very
got
much
bigger hogs, haven't they?
The trolls just tend to have bigger, different-looking trolls, whereas the Scorn have captured various random animals they've seen on their travel. So, the generic tanky type ones are these basic bipedal elephant-type creatures
called
that
Titans.
that actually have 4 arms. So, I don't know, called Titans that walk around with these tusks and generally ram into things and tank things up. Their more combaty ones are actually Cyclopses that they've captured around about in place, and they have big, massive 2-hand swords and armours and stuff.
I know it doesn't make a difference, but it's driving me mad. The plural of Cyclops is Cyclopes.
Cyclopes.
Things
you didn't know, there's various other little animals and stuff as well they've captured along the way. There's the Animatrax, which is like a really big ass turtle on crack.
They've got like some kind of snapping turtle thing, haven't they?
Yeah, that's the Animatrax. Oh
no, it's like a bipedal snapping turtle. It looks like something out of Turtles.
Yes.
Oh no, that's a minion one, isn't it?
No, there's like a one.
Is there another one that they've got as well?
They've got one as well. There's some. It looks like Rocksteady, is it?
No, it looks like one of the ones out of the live-action Turtles movie from the 90s.
90s, that one, There's basically, they've got loads of different types of animals, and each different type of animal, you can just look at the animal and you can kind of see what their job is because they are that species of animal within that faction. And basically that's what attracted me to it. They also have, in my opinion, some of the more impressive-looking gargantuan creatures, which is just something that's happened to have fluked across as time's gone through with the evolving game. Gargantuan creatures are basically Hordes version of super heavies, for lack of a better way of describing it. They're really big monsters.
Big friggin' huge things.
Their base is a CD, that size type base. They are massive monsters. They're worth an absolute brick ton of points. They're that big they actually have 2 different lines of sight because they can't look left and right at the same time. They're huge, basically. And they have the 2 most stunning ones, I reckon, in Hordes, and that's the Mammoth, which is one of those big bipedal elephant things with a crap ton of cannons fastened to its back.
Plus an elephant with a cannon on its back.
That walks on 2 legs and punches you.
And then they've got the Hydra, which is a new one, which is on its way, which is just probably one of the best looking models I've seen.
I haven't seen the Hydra model.
Stunning. Absolutely
the only one
beautiful.
The only one of the new Gargantuans I've seen is the Glacier King, which is, to be honest, there isn't a bad Gargantuan model.
No.
The Archangel is one of the nicest models that's ever been
absolutely
made.
beautiful dragon. Pity it's shite rules-wise, unfortunately.
It got better. The latest FAQ made it better.
Oh, did it? All right,
I'm told. I haven't read
Legion,
it.
But yeah, stunning models. I've had Scorn for a while as well. I got them bought mostly as a birthday present many, many moons ago when an old Wargaming Centre that was in Leeds was closing down, and my other half decided to buy me loads on as part of this closing down sale that was coming with it. And basically, that's what got me stuck with the start a bit from that, and that's what's decided who I'm going to be playing with in the campaign, and that is Makeda. Makeda's
She's their big leader.
Yeah,
now,
she's their cover girl, so to speak. She is. The story is basically, it's not about her, but in the background she's doing stuff, and then as the story goes on, you can kind of see she's getting more and more powerful throughout it.
And then she overthrows
the
tyrant.
old leader, becomes the new boss man, and basically wrecks space in general. So something we've not touched on is the story evolves, and as the story evolves, so does the characters. So in this campaign, because of the way we're playing it, I'm going to have Makeda in there's 3 possible different versions of her, because it's her through the ages, starting from when she was just a peon and basically just being a general sergeant.
Well, she was still an archdominator. She was the highest rank. She was like general, admiral, field marshal, that kind of thing. She just wasn't empress, which is basically what she is now.
Yeah, true. So yeah, basically she's her from that point, and then obviously as she's gotten slightly stronger and stronger, even more still throughout the story. The other character I'm going to be using is a guy called Xerxes, and that's mostly because he's got a model where he's riding a giant fucking turtle, and it's awesome.
It is awesome. It's enormous, and it is
awesome. Yeah, it's a guy with massive clubs riding a turtle. It sounds crazy.
I think it's more like a rhino beetle.
A rhino beetle could be a good way of summing it up. A stag beetle, something like that.
Yeah,
except
but like a friggin' huge one.
Yeah, it's awesome. I don't know. Just look it up. It looks stunning, and basically, my list will be aiming at getting him in there at some point as well. So that's pretty much my lists.
Were you planning out of interest on starting? You'll just pick and choose as you go on, I imagine. But were you going to use like the early levels of Makeda to start with, or were you just going to pick up around? Or
well, I managed to buy one of those £100 box set deals, which they Privateer Press cottoned on to the fact that Age of Sigmar was coming, or something was coming a while ago, and they kind of did something really sensible. They asked their local tournament scenes and their forums and stuff about what you would like to have in a 35-point box.
Like a 35-point army.
Yeah, really, army, yeah. Which basically is the equivalent to about 1500-point 40k army, maybe a 1500-point fantasy army from back in the day, that type of thing.
Like that, yeah.
So it's a decent size, it gets you in, and obviously they listen to a lot of feedback, and they put out a lot of these boxes, which were basically the stuff to make this 35-point list that these players had suggested, but at about 50% of the retail cost.
Some of them were not that much
some
cheaper.
Of them, yeah,
some
it was
of them
between 30 and 50%. Yeah,
the Crix one I think is a ridiculous. It's like half the price. Yeah. But it just depends on which one. But all of them are a good deal.
They're all absolutely fantastic deals. And thankfully, James was looking through a local store we've got in Leeds and managed to find one of these Scorn boxes that was sold out everywhere. And basically, I impulse bought that to get me back into it and give me a boost to the Scorn I already had sat gathering dust in my basement.
So, have you given any thoughts how you're going to paint them yet?
I'm going to go good old-fashioned box art. I like the gold and red scheme.
Yeah,
I think it's really pretty. I actually am going to use that new GW gold as well because that's such a nice gold.
That is amazing. I use it for the first time recently on my Horde stuff. I still don't think it paints the Stormcast well. As I said last time, I think the time I put into painting the gold with glazes over a brass colour and then warming it and adding shading and stuff, I think that gave a better finish as far as I'm concerned. But the gold itself, especially for what you're using it for, what I'm using it for, which is detailing, edging, that kind of thing, it's amazing because you don't have to paint yellow on first. You don't have to put 2 coats on. You don't have to glaze it. You paint up the base gold on, and if all you're doing is doing like a shoulder pad rim, that's pretty much good enough.
Yeah, exactly. So
worth every penny, those paints.
It's really good paint, but yeah, basically poster art, so to speak, with it all. I'm probably going to use the textured cracked earth paint just to give them that desert.
The Martian
Agroland Earth.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, because that's this year's snow basing, which was last year's autumnal basing.
Just because that's where they're from. They're from that deserty, dry, arid area of the world, so it gives them that nice look to the base as well. It keeps them kind of in theme from where they're from.
It complements the warm palette quite well as well.
Yeah. So it's that's me.
Well, I'm doing Trollbloods, and the reason why I chose those is 2 or 3 years ago we decided that we'd try doing a Warmachine slow
It's
growth.
one of those things that we seem to try every year, and it never really takes off, does it?
Yeah,
Seems different this year, though.
I wonder why.
Well, I think
it's all down to the narrative in the background. I think.
That is
Yeah.
exactly.
I just think that this time there was a little bit of stage of limbo with Age of Sigmar and fantasy. I think before we've always sort of played it for a while, and then we've always gone back to fantasy or 40k. Whereas we're all still playing 40k. I think. Well, I don't want to speak for everyone, but I think we're all enjoying it. We all play 30k, and I think everyone here is still playing Age of Sigmar, aren't they? So, but
unlike Warhammer, we don't want to play Age of Sigmar to the exclusion of all of the games.
Yeah, exactly. So I think and there's enough of us in it this time where we can almost accept the fact if 2 people drop out, we've still got enough of us to go with it. So I think I think everyone's a little bit more motivated this time as well. People have invested actual money in it this time as opposed to £30 for a starter box.
Yeah. So Neil, your reason for playing Trollbloods this time is that you already had them from last time. Why did you get them last time?
Well, what I did is I decided I wasn't going to look at any rules. I was just going to look at the models and buy the ones that I like the look of, and then paint them up and figure out later if they were any good or not. So I looked through, and the Trollblood stood out. I mean, I'm not a massive fan of some of the Warmachine models themselves. The Warjacks and all that, they're a bit too. Some of them just don't look quite right for me. So I was looking at the Horde stuff anyway, and by far the Trollbloods are the nicest, in my opinion, models because they've got the most character to them. Because whereas like the Scorn are blatantly evil, and they look blatantly evil, the Trollbloods are kind of what Games Workshop did with the Orcs and the Goblins to some extent. They've got that character to them, which I always like in a model. And also the big meaty models, which means they've got big meaty joints, because a lot of the Property Press models are still metal. And I know because I've looked at some of the other infantry, and you're looking at pinning something that's not much bigger than the pin you're going to use to put it in, and I don't have the patience to do that.
Games Workshop has spoilt us with the quality of the models.
Games Workshop have definitely spoilt us. I think we've all said at some point over the last month or so, you do not realise how good Games Workshop is until you go and you try and build another company's models. That's not to say the Property Press ones aren't good.
The actual finish of the models, when you look at them, they are stunning, but they are such a pain in the arse to put together.
I think a lot of that, though, is that maybe this is wrong, but Games Workshop seem to have a much faster cycle. Like you won't often build a Games Workshop model now that is more than 3 or 4 years old, whereas the Privateer Press stuff, some of that stuff's 10 years old. Like the Brigands I built for the Pharaoh.
Oh yeah, a lot of my Troll
is 10
stuff
years old.
Is the original.
You won't often build a 10-year-old Games Workshop model unless it's a single model. You won't often have a unit of 20 guys to build that are 10 years old because they've replaced it all with new plastics. So I think that's a big. I think the newer Privateer Press stuff is much closer.
Better,
much
but
closer.
It's still
not to the same standard, but it's much better than the old stuff.
And it's little things like they don't include instructions.
Yeah.
Which isn't necessarily a massive deal. It's not as bad as I tried building some Malifaux stuff, and I've still got a bit left that I couldn't figure out what it was or where it went. You know, you can figure out where everything goes, but just a set of instructions would be nice.
Yeah.
It's like I've just built some Trollblood Champions, which are a new plastic set, and it's only when you start putting them together that you actually realise that the arms only fit on certain models.
Yeah.
Because the joints are different, and I think that's their way of saying this arm goes on this model, which is fine. But from a conversion point of view, I might want to swap the arms, and you can't without starting to whittle things down. And
so even if it was just online instructions,
yeah,
even if it was just a little piece of paper in the box that said, "Here's the web address," and then you go on there and there's online instructions.
QR code or just a link to a
just
YouTube
something.
video. But it's just. But other than that, when they're built, they're fantastic, and the trolls are a lot bigger, which means that they're nice to paint.
That's something I've not mentioned. They're 32 million scale, Hordes and Warmachine.
Yeah, but effectively so is Games Workshop now.
Yeah, I suppose, especially with the.
I bet the Sigmarite would look too big against Warmachine scale.
Probably.
I think
Again,
I think they've almost overtaken
possibly a
them.
troll blood.
Yeah.
So you hinted earlier that you weren't going to paint them in the kind of box art colour of blue skin, red quills.
No, I can't. I looked and I thought I quite like the cartoony nature of them, but that makes them look just too cartoony. It just didn't do anything for me, did that colour scheme. But then I looked at them and I thought, well, I wonder what they'd actually look like painted in flesh colours. So that's what I've done with them. Is they're all painted in normal human skin tones, with then the hair, or it's kind of more of a quill, isn't it, than a hair. I've done that in blue to match back to the original scheme, and they've also got on them they're almost rocky growths, aren't they?
Yeah, they have like stone stubble that grows out of bits of them. The older they get, the bigger they get. So some of the larger trolls have actually got like bits of mountain growing out of their back.
So on the troll kin, which are basically
they're like half trolls, aren't they? Almost?
Yeah, they're sort of like human trolls essentially. Aren't they? The trollkins are the ones who will go out and they will interact with a human, and you get some of them, and some of the warcasters have lived in human society for periods of time, and then they've come back because of what's happened in the story. So they're essentially an intelligent race, and so I've done those with the stubble red to again match back to the original work. The larger trolls, so you've then got the like true trolls, like your dire trolls, and they're much bigger, and so I've done those with the stone being a sort of very light grey stone colour, so sort of it actually does look like they've got rock sort of growing out of them. But I've gone with this flesh scheme, and I've painted the clothing in again sort of more human colours, because they're, I think somebody mentioned before, on the box art they're Scottish and they wear tartan, and I wasn't. Well,
I think there are a few different themes within
there
the
are
trolls,
there are a few
of
different
them
fields,
wear tartan.
but a lot of the trollkin wear tartan.
They pretty much all wear tartan. There are Scottish trolls, there are Welsh trolls, there are Norse trolls, effectively, but they all wear tartan because that's part of their clannish Creole identity.
So again, I've not done that. I've gone with essentially minor Wayne togas, which has actually given them. It's ended up with sort of quite a Greco-Roman feel to them, because quite a lot of the helmets on the trollkins are quite gladiatorial in design when they've actually got helmeted faces. So it's given them a sort of almost Greco-Roman feel, which was purely by accident, but I actually quite like it, and it's given me this sort of quite unique looking Trollblood army.
Are you going to get some pictures up on the blog?
Yeah, there'll be some pictures. I'll get some pictures up on the blog before this post goes out of them. And if you follow me on Twitter, you'll see sort of a few work in progress shots as I'm painting them. I've currently got. I think I'm the only one with a full force painted.
Yes.
Show off.
I'm not far off.
You're not far off. I think I figured out the other day. I think I've got 30, maybe 35 points painted.
Oh, I've nearly got my 15 points painted.
So I'm a bit ahead, but that's because I had, I think, 15 points painted to begin with, and then I've just added to that. But it's actually been. This is the first army that I've gone back to, and I've enjoyed it as much, if not more, painting it this time around. And also, it's been interesting this time around, because obviously my painting's improved and I've got a lot quicker, so it's been a much nicer experience this time around painting it than it was last.
Yeah, something about these models I'm actually really enjoying painting. I've said this on Twitter. For me, it's always been more about the hobby side of it than gaming. I've always been into the painting, modelling more than anything else. And over the last year, it's felt like the painting has more and more become a chore. And even like I was really happy with the end result of my Chaos War Mammoth, but I hated every minute of painting it. It wasn't fun to paint. Whereas
it's because you feel like you've got you've got in mind you're going to an event, you must have this and this and this done, so you're setting yourself a target. Whereas now you're just like, I like the look of that model, I'll paint it.
Yeah, I'm just really enjoying actually painting it. If we never play a game of it, I won't be that disappointed because I've got so much enjoyment out of sitting at my desk painting the models, and that's...
You're painting stuff as well that you don't really see in the GW world, so it's different. You're painting giant stone constructs.
Well, Dan doesn't see anything, it's not in the Warriors of Chaos book.
That's true.
So it's not a Warriors of Chaos model, so that helps.
Yeah. To be honest, I think part of it is that for the last 2 years, all I've painted is silver. I've painted my silver Chaos Warriors, I've painted Grey Knights, I've painted the Stormcast that I'm doing in silver. It was really nice to paint something that's not wearing any armour, that is just all natural colours. So I suppose that probably brings it on to what I'm doing. I've chosen the Circle Orberus, who are the druids, really.
Tree huggers.
Yeah, the Circle's got a few little sub-factions within it, but they're kind of a mix of fuzzy beasts like wolves, werewolves, griffins, satyrs, things like that, kind of classic forest beasts, and what they call walled constructs, which are, for want of a better word, stone robots. Yep. Stone and wood strapped together, covered in blood and magically animated, and I love them. I really like the look of those. And I played with Circle back in the first incarnation of Hordes, just when one book was out for Hordes. And I played just with the stone stuff then, and I thought my thinking now was, I'll stick to just the sticks and stones sub-faction. It gives me a relatively limited amount of warlocks I could reasonably use, a relatively limited amount of models. I can probably buy everything in that faction, like James did with the Pharaoh. And then I've gone full on into this,
crazy.
Batshit crazy, and gone way beyond that. I've got all kinds of other stuff at the Circle. The more I look through it, I realise there pretty much isn't a model I don't like for the Circle. There isn't a model that I don't want to play with. I love how the rules work. I've always liked that kind of 7th edition Wood Elf style of dodging around and not just play. Much as I love playing Warhammer with my Warriors of Chaos and marching forward and hit people in the face, the Circle playstyle in Warmachine appeals to me a lot more than the Chaos Warriors walk forward and hit stuff would in the Warmachine rules. Like I said, I love the models. I'm really enjoying painting them. So for my two main warlocks to use, I've got one who will work with all the sticks and stone stuff, and then another who's more fuzzy, monstrous beasts. So I can kind of get the whole faction in there. It's going to make it more expensive because it means I need 2 completely separate lists.
But then you're ready for all those big events you want to go to.
I am. So I have chosen Bradigus Thal, the Rune Carver. And now, to be honest, Bradigus is very, very good with the sticks and stones and constructs. He's really great for that. I picked him because I wanted to paint this model since it came out. I just think it's an absolutely fantastic model, really dynamic. I didn't realise when I bought it how good he was going to be with everything. I love the rules for Brad, I love the model for Brad, so he was definitely going in the sticks and stones side. And on the other side, in the background, I've always liked the character Cromac the Ravenous. Cromac is a Tharn, which are kind of a barbarian society that worships the Devourer Worm, which is kind of primordial destroyer, death, blood, sacrifice, all that kind of stuff. And the Circle have kind of secured the Tharn service and uses them as shock troops a lot in their battles. And they have the ability to transform into kind of bigger, meatier, musclier, still fleshful, but not so much hairier, more just kind of like Hulk-like beef up, and then they run in and hit things. And I thought Cromac's rules, his original rules, Cromac the Ravenous, were really interesting because you could play him he can change forms during the game. So you can play him in his human shaman form, where he's good support warlock, he's got good spells, he runs his beast very well, and then if the opportunity arises, you can Hulk out, grab his axes and go charging forward and chop stuff up. But then I read the background for the epic version of Cromac, which, as you were saying with Makeda, it's the next iteration of him, where he's in beast mode all the time, and he's got... He has, because he's picked up one of the Trollkin's cursed axes, and now he's got even bigger, even more muscly. That model is amazing, and I've got one of those on the way. So I'll be running Chromac with lots of werewolves on the other side.
Yeah, I should also mention the casters I'm going to use for the Trollbloods. The main one I'm going to use is Madrak Ironhide, the World Ender, who, if the Trollbugs are the protagonists of the story, then
he's the hero.
He is the hero.
There's
He's
two,
Tom Cruise, isn't he?
There's two big Trollblood characters who represent different ideologies. You've got Madrak Ironhide and Horlock Doomshaper. I'm not really sure how to pronounce his name.
I'm not, but
call him
yes.
Doomshaper. And we were talking the other day. These guys are a bit like the Martin Luther King and Malcolm X of the Trollblood world, because all the trolls really want is some independence. They keep settling their lands and then getting kicked off them. Or if you want a more kind of geekier and less real world example, Madrak Ironhide is Charles Xavier and Doomshaper is Magneto. They both want the same things, but they've got very different ways of going about them. Madrak's the nicer, more sympathetic, doesn't butcher people just for the sake of it side of things, whereas I think Doomshaper would be happy if there were only trolls left on the planet.
Yeah, I think that's actually basically Doomshaper's plan, isn't it? Is just eradicate everything else and then we'll be fine.
Yeah. Kill them all and let Dunia sort them out.
Yeah. So I'm playing with Madrak in part because he came in the start box, so I already had him, but also I really do like his background. And then the other caster I'm playing with is Grim Angus, which again I just chose because I like the look of him. He doesn't actually work with any of the other models I have apart from possibly the Impalers, because Grim Angus is a
Sniper,
ranged
really, isn't he?
caster.
Yeah.
He's all
Is
about.
that the guy with the rocket launcher on him?
No, that's
it's
Gunbjorn.
Gunbjorn.
Grim is the guy with the big ass rifle that's also an axe.
He's basically a big game hunter, isn't he?
Yeah.
Because a lot of the Trollblood warcasters in the background have been. I think even Madrak at one point is with one of the human.
Yeah, he fought with King Leto, the Signarin king. He was good friends with King Leto, and that's why he's one of the advocates for not butchering every human they meet, because he was on good terms with a lot of humans.
And Grim, in the same way, has worked alongside humans. So is the one you just mentioned. I can't remember the name of.
Gunbjorn. Gunbjorn was in the Signarin army, I think.
Which is why he's got the big rocket launcher, essentially.
Yeah.
So you've got quite a lot of these warcasters who are basically they've heard the call and they've gone back to their kin. And Grim Angus is one of those, but he's very much he does everything at range. And other than the Troll Impalers, I don't have anything that works at range, so I need to get hold of a load of
scattergunners or something.
highwaymen.
I
really like the highwaymen. They're such nice models. If you haven't seen them, have a look at them, because they are nice enough models that you will look at and think, I'm going to start an army of these just to paint these.
Yeah.
Because they're essentially giant trolls with two pistols dressed as a highwayman.
Now, both Grim and Madrak have been around since very early days in Horde, so their stories developed quite a lot. They've both got epic versions of their warlocks. Are you going to restrict yourself just to the prime versions that you've got, or are you going to be looking at Madrak the World Ender and the Hunter's Grim as well?
At the moment, I only have the models for the original ones, so at the moment it will just be those two. At some point, I probably will end up picking up the epic models, but I've not even finished painting Grim yet. I've had him half painted for about 3 years now, and he'll certainly be the secondary caster, because, like I said, I've got to buy, build, and paint a shed load of other stuff to go with him. I can actually see me just using Madrak throughout the entirety of this campaign.
I get upset when I cut his head off with Chromac.
But I mean, he works as a narrative anyway because of who he is.
Yeah.
But yeah, I might well end up with the epic version of Madrak. I also have, because I managed to pick it up for nothing off eBay, an old meta version of Griselle Bloodsong.
The Fellcaller.
Yeah.
She's like Madrak's lieutenant, really, in the background.
Who again, she might get painted, and I might use her as my
She's a wild card.
my wild card.
Yeah. I should probably mention my wild card will be one of the versions of Boulder, who is the other big sticks and stones warlock. he's the other one who really wants to work with just the stone construct stuff. So he'll be my wild card for when I get bored of chopping stuff up with Chromac. So we're going to start our first proper campaign games over the next week. The results will be going up each month, and the story will develop. I guess we'll put the story up on the blog as well, and probably touch on it as we're recording other episodes over the next few weeks. So if anybody's interested, they can get in touch with us. We're happy to answer more questions about it. I guess we should say as well, we have got 2 other players who aren't here tonight, not actually hosts on the podcast, but they might be on to talk about their armies and how they're getting on with it at some point. And that's Richard, who's also playing with Trollbloods, and I think he's just using Madrak at this moment.
Yeah, I think at the moment Richard's just got the starter set and a diode throw, which is a nice 15 points.
Yeah. And Wayne, who's playing with the only actual Warmachine player in this campaign, because we've all taken Hordes factions. Wayne's playing with the Rulik mini sub-faction of Mercenaries. Mercenaries are, again, a bunch of models that will work for other armies, but who can also be bound together into their own armies. Like James's Pharaoh, the Rulik sub-faction is reasonably small, and they're all dwarves. And Wayne will be playing with... he's got General Osram at the moment. There's only 2 other dwarven warcasters, Durgan Madhammer and Gorten. So he'll use all of them at some point, I imagine. And Wayne's very much into the hobby as well. He's a very, very good painter. And I think we'll probably see if we can get him on at some point, him and Richard on, to have a chat about how their forces are getting on. They're also both very, very new to it, whereas we've all kind of dabbled before in the past. I think Richard's never played before, and Wayne has. I think he's bought models before, but never got them onto the table.
Yeah.
I mean, it should be said with Warmachine, because we were talking earlier about sort of the way the game plays and the like. I found last time that it just did not click. I've had, I think, 4 or 5 games of it, and every game I played, I was relying on my opponent to tell me what I needed to do and when. And then this time round, I've got a couple of games in and it's actually clicked and it's actually started making sense. And I think it is. Again, I think it's possibly something to do with the way the rules are written, because, like we've said, they're really tight, but they can also be quite dry. That you kind of need to stick at it for a few games until you reach the point where, because not only do your rules need to click, but also then the special rules for you and the special abilities of your warcaster and your actual army,
and how they all interact,
and because it's very much about the synergies. I'm finding with the Trollbloods, there's lots of support units that you butt in that buff your main units that you want to be fighting, and the army is much better with those units than it is by just putting in like an extra fighter unit, and that's just how it works, and it works really well. And the synergies, I'm just starting to get my head around it. It's really well thought out.
Yeah, I think I'm very similar with the Shifting Stones for the Circle faction. That is a unit of 3 immobile obelisk pillars of stone that have got a few little nice effects, the little things they can do to help you out, and they can teleport themselves, or if you're within a triangle of them, you can teleport you. Not over a massive distance. And I remember looking at the rules, playing a couple of games with them, thinking, I know these are good, and they're made of stone, so they're going in my army. But I just couldn't figure out how to use them. And when we were doing some practice games last weekend, it just suddenly clicked, and I realised why everybody rates them so much, and they were a huge advantage to me. So I think it's the sort of thing that you can't learn it with theory. You've got to play it and just keep playing it until it clicks.
After a while, it just clicks, and then you sort of invested then as well. Whereas until it clicks, you just like Neil said, if you're almost being shown how to play, and it doesn't feel like you're playing the game until it clicks and you get that, at least the basics.
So I think we've had a few questions as well from Twitter, haven't we?
I was going to say, shall we take a quick break and then we'll come back with some questions? So we'll see you after the break. So let's move on to some listener questions.
Yeah, quite a lot this week. I'm quite impressed with this. So we'll start. Ben has asked us, for someone who doesn't know anything about 30k or 40k, who or what is the Emperor?
A dick.
Sigma.
He's not Sigmar.
Possibly the best way to explain who he is to use the old canon of which goes through who he has been in history.
Well, it kind of starts before then, doesn't it? Now, this originally...
Well, you see, we've got to be careful because you're potentially getting into spoilers here if they keep to this canon to people who haven't read the original Realms of Chaos stuff. If you go into his full creation myth,
I don't know that it will be revealed as a spoiler so much. It's pretty much all over the. This information's all available anyway because they haven't yet retconned it to not happen.
How about we just go spoiler alert? If you don't want to hear this, skip on it.
If the book's been out for more than 2 years, it's
been out for like 25 years.
It's no longer a spoiler.
Okay, so in a nutshell, there were a whole bunch of shamans back in way back when on Earth who were effectively immortal. Every time they died, they were able to reincarnate. Their souls inhabited something else, and they came back. And then, as more humanity and civilization started to develop, and the Chaos Gods were created by the bigger and bigger groups of humans starting to feel hatred, lust, despair, and hope, which we've touched on before, which they fuel and create the Chaos Gods. As the Chaos Gods appeared, these group of shamans started to realise that a lot of them weren't coming back. Their souls were being devoured by the Chaos Gods. So, taking steps to do it, they poured all of their souls into one super vessel and created the perfect human, the perfect man who was immortal, super psychically powered, the Gestalt presence of all of these magical shaman, and that was the Emperor. This was thousands of years ago to us, a lot longer than that.
You're probably talking about, this is 40,000 years ago from now, essentially, aren't you?
This is before recorded history. Yeah. And then the Emperor kind of trucks around Earth for quite a long time. In the original 80s fluff, 80s background or lore, sorry, he broke my own rule there. He was a lot of characters throughout history. He was probably King Arthur. He might have been Napoleon. He might have been, I think it might have been Hitler, wasn't it? One of the suggestions.
I think that's the one they've retconned the most. I think somebody made that suggestion and everybody said, we shouldn't have said that.
Well, I think it's because at one point they'd suggested he might have been Jesus, and then at that point they sat down and thought, are we actually saying that Jesus might be Hitler? So let's just never mention this again.
Basically, every founder of every major religion at some point.
He was Alexander the Great, I think.
Yeah.
Chief eunuch. I'm full of red dwarf today.
He also appears in Mechanicum essentially as St. George.
Yeah.
Which again is part of the old fluff that was kind of transfers across.
He was around trying to shape human history, trying to guide it and prevent chaos from taking over for a long time.
But basically, it never quite worked. He's kind of like Bellicor, actually.
Yes, they don't explain why it got to the stage where there was then the Age of Darkness and the Age of Strife, and all the technology was lost. How did he manage to screw up that much? How did it get to that point in the first place? It's just because they needed it to in the plot. It should never have got this bad. So then you have many years of the Imperium, what will become the Imperium, the human empire, being divided by powerful warp storms, everyone forgetting how to do everything, Earth itself regressing to a state of techno-barbarianism, and after like 10,000 years of that, I think...
He kind of gets a bit bored, doesn't he?
All right.
I've had enough of this.
Game on, let's get this sorted. And he whips up some super soldiers, some early batch, not quite right there super soldiers, the Thunder Warriors. He conquers Earth, he unites Earth, and then he sets off with his grand plan to conquer the stars, which is all preaching this secular imperial truth, where his plan is the only way to ever defeat the Chaos Gods is to kill all living things in the universe, and that's probably not worth doing if what you want to do is defeat chaos to save humanity at the expense of every living human being ever. So he thinks if he preaches this secular truth and just starves the Chaos Gods of worship, starves them of belief, that they will cease to exist, or they'll weaken to the state where they'll no longer have any hold over the mortal realm.
And that doesn't go well.
It all goes tits up because he doesn't explain to the Primarchs why he's now dicking off back to Earth to do some secret experiment, which was a great experiment. He was building the human webway, which would allow them access to interplanetary travel, interstellar travel, like the Eldar do, without any risk of having to plunge through the Hell dimension and hope that demons don't eat your face or eat your soul and that you arrive when you wanted to and not millions of years later, or possibly a few years earlier than you set off, which is what warp travel entails in the first place. So it was all a good plan. And if he'd just taken the time to explain this to Horus, instead of just mysteriously saying, I'm going to go now, and it's all very hush-hush, and I'm not telling anybody anything, then maybe there wouldn't have been the 10 years of the Horus Heresy Civil War, followed by 10,000 years of stagnation and death and skulls. But he didn't. He screwed up. He went during the time of the Horus Heresy. It's basically described a few times that he is a mortal man who appears however people would perceive the perfect person to be. There's always this kind of halo and aura around him, and he looks different to different people, which is why the artwork for him isn't consistent.
The Emperor looks like Angelina Jolie. Is that what you're telling me?
If that's who you think the perfect god is, then yeah. You do get the odd glimpse through. There are a couple of characters within the Heresy who actually basically see him for who he is. The one that springs to mind is John Grammaticus.
Yeah,
because
John knew him before he was famous.
Yeah.
So for somebody who doesn't know 30k and 40k, which is what
just to kind of update it to 40k. At the end of the Horus Heresy, he defeats Horus in single combat at the expense of very nearly dying. He gets strapped into something called the Golden Throne, which is at the end of the day a really elaborate life support device. And he needs to stay alive because he projects a very powerful psychic beacon through the warp, which is what they call the Astronomicon, and that's what humans use to navigate by. That's their North Star in the warp that they use to get around. So he has to survive for the Imperium to survive. But then the cult of the Emperor springs up, gains more strength. It becomes an official religion, 10,000 years of people believing that he is a god. And because of the way metaphysics work in the Warhammer 40,000 universe, because of the way the warp works, the sheer fact that a million worlds of Imperium, unnumbered souls of Imperial citizens, worship the Emperor, creates the God Emperor in the warp. It creates creates a god where there wasn't one before, because they believe in one so strongly that their emotional belief lends weight to that and creates that. Now there was some background written in the very first Warhammer 40,000 novels, the Inquisition War trilogy by Ian Watson, that if you could kill the Emperor, then his spirit would be released into the warp. It would merge with the God Emperor entity in the warp and create a new super powerful god who would either become the fifth Chaos God and destroy everything, or would defeat the Chaos Gods and save the universe. So that's what some people are trying to kill him, some people are trying to save him, some people just worship him.
Also should be said that the way they keep him alive on the Golden Throne,
he needs to eat 100 psychers a day,
is that they feed him the souls of psychers. This is the grimdark of the grimdark universe. Like, you are psychically gifted. It is a miracle. You're what 1 in a million. We shall put you on a ship you to Earth.
And you're the caviar of humanity.
And we will feed you to your god.
Glory be to the Emperor. Okay.
Right, spoilers over.
Moving on. Spongehammer asks us, currently reading Gotrek and Felix, and I'm on the second book. What's the best Warhammer fluff/lore books to read? Now, I presume this is asking us specifically about Warhammer, about the old world, rather than Warhammer 40,000, because the answer to that is the Eisenhorn trilogy. And if you want the best Warhammer fiction, it's probably still the Eisenhorn trilogy. And everybody should have read the Eisenhorn trilogy. It's amazing. We might do once Spuddy's read it, we might actually do a proper review of this. It's an old book now. A lot of people have read it, but it is unbelievably good. But for old world, I've heard a lot of good things about Riders of the Dead, but I must confess I have never read it myself.
I will admit too, I've read a couple of the Gotreks and Felix, and other than that, I've never been able to get into any of the Warhammer fantasy novels. Have always been a bit too
Tolkien.
Yeah.
And you see,
Elves with really long names I can't pronounce.
I've read a lot of them, but most of them are not great.
Yeah.
I liked the Gotrek and Felix books, but it gets a bit samey after a while.
I kind of want to read the last ones to see how it all ends, but I don't feel like you need to have read everything in between to get there.
I don't think I suppose the Archaean books are very good if you're interested in Archaean, but if you've listened to any earlier episodes of our podcast, I've pretty much told you everything that happens in those. I actually really like Gilead's Blood. That's a Dan Abnett book. It's kind of strange. It doesn't fit into a lot of the background nowadays for what was the old world. It's about an elf who's one of the last nobles in an all but abandoned tower somewhere in the old world, whose twin brother is killed in combat, and he has half of his soul killed, and he's kind of really miserable and then goes around killing a whole load of people. It's written a bit like the early Gotrek and Felix books in that it's a series of short stories about Gilead's life. But the last short story in there is basically a novella, which is the Warhammer equivalent of the Magnificent Seven. It's a little township that's being besieged by people, and they go and recruit mercenaries from all over to come and help them, and Gilead's one of those, and that read really well as Dan Abnett writing the old world equivalent of the Magnificent Seven.
The only other thing I can think of which is really good, but possibly quite outdated now, is if you can get hold of the original Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay background books, not the new Fantasy Flight ones, but the ones that Games Workshop originally did.
The one with the Slayer on the front.
Yeah.
It's a big
First and second edition.
They are full of... That, to me, is the old world. And that's partly why because I read those books when I was sort of 12, 13. That's partly why I've never bothered to read any of the new stuff, because I don't really want it to change from that, because that was amazing.
Okay. Rob Strachan has been in touch.
It's been on.
Rob is an expatriate night owl who's now living overseas. He wants to know, what do you think of all the pool type restrictions for Age of Sigmar floating about? Does the game need it?
I don't mind it.
We don't want to hear from James on this one.
No, see, I honestly think because the pool type restrictions are what James is after. They essentially give things a points value.
Yeah.
And yeah, obviously it's done by whoever, and they can decide what.
You see, I know you don't want my opinion on it, but
I don't want your opinion. I don't want a 25-minute rant.
No. My opinion on Age of Sigmar, as it is from GW, is if you want to sit down with a couple of mates and you have a 10-minute chat before you play, it works fine. And as long as nobody's a dick, everything's great and it works. It works. If you want to play it as a competitive game, which isn't what Games Workshop wrote it for, in my opinion, it needs some sort of comp, like more comp, I think it's called, or a wounds comp. Or I think it's up to the TOs to put some sort of restriction on it. So I think it works for either. But in my opinion, if you want to play it competitively, which I'm not saying you should or shouldn't play competitively, I just think it needs something.
I'd rather someone put some comp in about just don't. If you could find a way to comp people being a dick, instead of comping what they bring, just comp them being dicks.
Yeah, GW have done it. You can't win the GW events unless you've got best game votes. That comps the whole "don't be a dick" thing.
But that means they can't win. Yeah. It doesn't mean they can't be a dick.
Yeah, that still ruins your game. the only I don't want it to need it, because I never thought 8th edition needed comp. I know lots of people did. I didn't share that opinion. I don't want Age of Sigmar to need all this extra stuff. I don't know that we've had it long enough to decide yet. I think a certain degree of self-comping is possible. The only reason I would ever entertain it in an event from a kind of event organizer point of view is that you have a finite amount of time. Each round has to be 2 hours or 2.5 hours, and you need some way, in theory, to limit what people bring so that the game can be over in that sort of time. But as things go on, using the proper deployment mechanic where you're kind of trying to think, ooh, have I got enough to win but still get the better chance of getting the first turn and get the better chance of getting sudden death? Should I stop now? How do I do it?
I have a unit in my case that can counter that unit. Put down the ball
if people find a way to kind of just find the level where you think yourself, I'm going to have to stop putting stuff down and we're not going to finish this game and I'm not going to be able to win if we don't finish the game, then it wouldn't need it. But until we get more experience with it, till people, I don't whether that might be a thought experiment that people can never reach that sort of level. I would prefer it if that was the way it started to go.
At the end of the day, it's not what it doesn't. Whatever system it is, it's not what you play; it's who you play. That's what will make you enjoy the game. And having playing people that want the same thing you do out of the game. If two players both want to play super tight, competitive Warhammer or Age of Sigmar or Warmachine, whatever it is, if two players want to play ultra competitive, the only thing that really matters is winning. As long as both players want that, they'll probably enjoy it. It's getting that balance of not having somebody who's there to win and playing somebody who's there to have fun and play a narrative, and that's what it all boils down to. But that's with any system.
I think as well, as James said, with Age of Sigmar and with any game really, you need to sit down with your opponent and have a conversation before you play. And in the past, Games Workshop has done part of that conversation for you because they put points in. So, you know, the conversation can be, well, I'm bringing 1,500 points. All right, I'll bring 1,500 points.
Yeah.
You never had to play with 1,500 points versus 1,500 points, and it was encouraged in the back of the big red book. There were scenarios where you weren't playing like that. And what a TO does, if you actually think about it, essentially, is he has that conversation for you, because you can't have that conversation with 6 people who you don't know who you're going to be playing. So the TO has that conversation by saying, this is the comp that we're going to use in this environment, so everybody knows that we're playing to the same thing. Whether or not you agree about the idea of there being comp, if you don't have comp, that is essentially that the TO has had that conversation, because he said we're not going to have it, we don't need it. Or if he says this is the comp, well, that's that conversation had for you by somebody else, because you can't have it yourself.
Yeah.
I think it works best, as you say, any game works best if you sit down with your opponent beforehand, so you both know what you're playing and why you're playing it. You can't do that at a tournament. So that conversation needs to be had by the tournament organizer, whether that is for we're going to use a comp system or we're not. That's still that conversation.
Yeah. Now, I'd be really interested to see how Games Workshop's event gets on with this. What I'd really like to see is how 16 people, you run a decent tournament with 16 people. If you could find a way as an experiment to get 16 players who've never played war games before, who've just got into it with Age of Sigmar, and have them play a tournament using the rules out of the book and see what happens. Because I genuinely don't know whether we're sat here going, it needs points, it needs pool comp, it needs wound comp, it needs a way to structure an army, because we don't know how to play any other way.
Well, even Games Workshop have put 100 model comp in their pack, haven't they?
And I think that's about a time limit thing. They only have a finite amount of time to play each round. I don't want it to need it, but I think the type of gamers that we have in the air quotes tournament scene will need it for it to resemble the type of game it's come from.
I genuinely think it's been written to be comped, though. I think Games Workshop have released a basic rules package that they know can easily be comped and will be comped.
Yeah. 8th edition was written like that. Games Workshop, there were many times in White Dwarf during the course of 8th edition where Jervis or somebody else quite freely said, this isn't a tournament game, it's not designed to be played at a tournament. If you want to play it at a tournament, make it work for your tournament and come up with your own rules. And there's many times throughout it as well where they said, if you don't want to play with this rule, or you want to play with this rule instead, you do that because it's your game. These are your basic rules. You take them and you do what you want with them. The problem is we've almost looked and we've ignored that section of the rules, because that section of the rules has always been there in some way, shape or form, saying that, and gone, no, this section of the rules is sacrosanct. We can't alter this section, but we will alter these sections, and it's never. It shouldn't really be like that.
Yeah.
Everything's up for debate, and everything's up to be changed. If you want to play it, and you want to take half the stats from 8th edition and play a few odd rules from 7th, go ahead.
Exactly.
If your opponent wants to play it that way.
I don't mind. If you guys want to play Age of Sigmar and my Chaos Battle Standard can still have a 3+3 rollable ward save, I'm happy with that. Yeah. Daz can use his feet every turn. I want my ward save back.
But in 6 months we'll probably know more. As far as I know, so far the only big event I've seen, there might have been others, but the only one I've seen that's used Age of Sigmar rules that I've seen feedback on is, I think it's Clash of Swords, is it, that Moa runs? Which was this weekend.
Yeah. Well,
I've never been,
have a good time.
but I've only seen positive feedback.
Yeah.
Now,
For me, it's not an event I'd go to because I'm too lazy. Cardiff's really far away from where we're based, and that's what's.
That's a location thing, though, more than us reading his pack and saying I don't like that pack.
No,
but I think that will happen.
If it was close, I'd be there in a heartbeat.
I think there will be a couple of like there was 9th, there was Swedish, there was ETC. There was a couple of compacts. I could see Age of Sigmar having a couple of compacts, and then you just choose which events you want to go to.
Yeah.
But and then there'll probably be some that just say out of the box, use what you want, bring what you want. Once 2 hours is up or 2.5 hours is up, you then total points or kills or whatever you're using, and go from there. But I think there'll just be variety, which is in all systems. I mean, even Warmachine, I think, has a few different rule sets that it uses for comp. There's sort of, I think there's hardcore, there's steamroller, there's a few different variations on the same rule set.
Yeah, but I think the important thing with that as well is it's not so much the comp as to what points and stuff things are worth, but more the fact that there are some scenarios for you to play. There is a reason to play this game.
Yeah, it needs that. We've learnt that already, haven't we? In the few games we played.
You've got to have the scenarios with it, otherwise
you need some reason not to just go meet in the middle and have a big mash up for 40 minutes.
You say that, but I can't remember a game of 8th edition we played, and we used the scenarios in every game of 8th edition from the day we were released. Unlike, I know a lot of people just kind of got into them in the last year or so as they became more popular in events.
Yeah,
we used them all the time. We pretty much only went to events that used them. And I can't remember playing a game against you, no matter what the scenario, that didn't end in some big-ass Tetris combat in the middle of the board.
You only play Warriors of Chaos, and I always play something that wants to fight. So neither of us ever played Dark Elves or Wood Elves. It was always my Orcs or my Beastmen or something similar are going to run into the middle and try and clobber your Warriors of Chaos. That's why me and you played Tetris.
Yeah.
That's all we ever played. But yeah, I 8th wasn't a perfect game by any stretch of the imagination. 8th had massive issues. I think Age of Sigmar's got issues, but I think every game has. And
there's no perfect war game. No. Is that chess isn't a perfect war game because White's clearly broken because it always gets to go first.
Yeah. I think see what next 6 months brings. I'm going to go to Aegom. I'm going to finish this Nurgle army off in a month. Go to Aegom. If after 4 or 5 games I'm not enjoying myself, I'll finish the games pretty quick and get to bar. So it's not like...
You see, for me...
the social side of the tournament scene is what I go for more than the game.
I'd like to see Aegis... For me, I think what Age of Sigmar has done is given us the opportunity, the drive to play a lot more campaigns amongst our own group, to play a lot more things like we're doing with Warmachine. Rather than every game just being practice for the next Warhammer tournament we're going to, it's let's play a bunch of linked games together, let's do this for these few months, let's do this, let's play. I mean, I'd quite like to play through some of the scenarios like in the right order from the Age of Sigmar books to retell bits of the story. But I want to wait till I've painted more than 5 Stormcasts to do that. I think it kind of opens up a lot more gaming like that, but it is at the expense of the tournament gaming without some kind of army structure at the moment. But like I say, the rumours. There were rumours the day after the War Scrolls were released that there is a competitive gaming supplement coming in the next year. Now, doesn't sound like something Games Workshop would do, but let's wait and see.
Yeah, but a lot of the things they've done in the last 3 months doesn't sound like things Games Workshop would do.
If you went
giving away sample games,
well, giving away the free rules. If you'd have said 6 months ago, Games Workshop were going to give the rules away free for one of their core systems, everybody would have gone, "You're mad."
Yeah,
there's no way they will do that.
So we'll just, like I say, 6 months down the line, we'll see where we are and go from there.
Yeah. So should we move on to the next question?
Yeah.
This is from Simon Fisher.
Skip on.
Who has apparently decided he's not appearing on any of the podcasts despite being listed as one of the hosts, and he's just going to ask us questions on Twitter instead. So Mr. Fisher wants to know what's the best and worst Kickstarter you've seen.
Ooh. I've only ever backed one Kickstarter because I've always heard bad things about them, and this summarises pretty much every Kickstarter ever. But basically, ages ago, they're on this guy, I don't know why, I must have had a couple of beers, but he was on about something called double 6 dice, which is basically, it's a D12 with the numbers 1 through 6 on it twice. And I thought, that's genius. They're round, therefore they must roll more even. Absolute genius idea. I'll back that. It's only $20. I'll do that. I'll get 30 dice or whatever it is in August. Great. Still waiting for them. It was a year and a half ago. Still not. I think I got an email through my inbox last week basically saying they're on the boat from China, so I might see them just before Christmas. And that to me just summarises Kickstarter. I can't stand the system because
my opinion on Kickstarter is I've never backed anything on Kickstarter, but that's because I couldn't be more Yorkshire, and I will not part with any money unless I'm getting a benefit there and then. But I agree. I think Kickstarter is great for new companies. I think too many companies use Kickstarter now because they don't want to invest when they've got the money to invest.
It's the lazy man's way of doing.
I'm going to just put this on a Kickstarter, and I mean I'm not going to name any particular companies or anything, but they just keep using Kickstarters for new systems all the time before they've fully developed the previous systems. And
I think we all know which company you're talking about, James.
Who?
I'll tell you what. I actually do have a worst Kickstarter I've seen. It's not one I backed. I'm not gonna pull out things that I think where I've got backed things as Kickstarter and not got the service I want. You guys all know when I've been particularly massively unimpressed with and underwhelmed with.
That spray on hair was shit.
But the first Gates of Antares Kickstarter they ran, and that was a terribly run campaign. They had no game. It's Rick Priestley's game now. It's coming out through Warlords Games. It looks pretty good. But at the time, they were like, well, we want you to... It was this idea where they'd have people develop the rules with them, and they'd have people develop the world with them, and it'd be this huge, big community project, which was great, but it doesn't work on Kickstarter, because they went in with no real product, no promise of what things were going to come. Asking, I think they were like, if you give us money, then you can suggest some rules to us, and... It was
and
like
I think it was, and we might, but it wasn't even, and we will put them in. I think it was, and we might put them in.
Unless you put loads of money in, and then we will put them in.
And they pulled that campaign. They had to stop it before the end because it wasn't working. It wasn't set up right for Kickstarter. Best run ones I've seen. I really like the ones that the Merchant Miniatures guys do. You've got to proper sit down and study it because their Kickstarters can be almost impossible to figure out what goes where and how stuff. What you're backing to get stuff. It's very complicated, but they're huge savings on their fantastic models. It actually makes their models affordable. They don't tend to promise something they can't deliver. They're realistic that some of the lead times are a long time because they have to wait for the best sculptors to be available to do them. They don't promise you'll have something in 3 months' time and then come to you in 3 months' time and say, no, it's going to be a while longer. Everything's got quite a long lead time on it. But they are fantastic models. They're really good at responding to what people want, and they're pretty good as well. They because they've got their own website. The Kickstarter stuff's all kind of done through there. You can keep buying stuff after the Kickstarter ends, and if that takes something above the level it reached in the campaign, and they hit another stretch goal, they'll unlock that stretch goal. So we've got one more question. I think it's kind of a dangerous question. We're running the risk of upsetting some people here. Dave O'Neill wants to know what is the best and worst single game and opponent, whether in a tournament or not.
I'm happy to do my best game because one comes to mind straight away.
It's when you played me, wasn't it?
It wasn't you. No, it wasn't. I had a game at the last Aegon where it was still 8th edition. I took all Night Goblins because I borrowed an army and thought I'd take a fun one. I played a guy who I can't remember his surname. I think it was Adam. It might have been Adam. If it's wrong, I apologise. But I think it was Adam Kunis. He's sort of. I think he's an actor from down London way somewhere. I had a game against him. He had Mono Khorne, Warriors of Chaos. I had all Night Goblins, and we both just went into it having a laugh. And it was sort of game 5 on table 4 or something at Aegon. So it could have been quite competitive. Both just had a laugh. Orcs and Goblins did what Orcs and Goblins do. My animosity went nuts. I had a giant. He charged. It wasn't Mono Khorne because he had a Zinj Chaos Lord on disc. Kitted up, 3-up ward, rerolling ones. Charged it into my giant. Did something like 4 wounds on the giant. The giant yelling balls ran him down, killed him. Overran into some other stuff, killed them. We had a unit of 10 Night Goblin archers. Charge because they failed animosity. Beat in combat and run down a unit of 5 Chaos Knights, Mark of Khorne. And the game just went nuts, but we both just had a massive laugh. And yeah, it was one of those where he hammered me, and because I was playing Night Goblins and animosity went for me and strange things happened and the dice went nuts, I ended up beating him. He could have gone off in a sulk, he didn't. We just had a massive laugh with it, had a beer. And yeah, that was the best game of war. Well, best war game I've had, I think.
You see, I couldn't pick just one. I could give you a quick rundown of like 3 or 4 really, really good games. Towards the tail end of the end times of 8th edition, me and Spuddy played a 10,000 point game of Warhammer, and that was absolutely amazing. That was a laugh all the way through. Thoroughly enjoyable. Swung back and forth. Looked like I was getting smashed at one point, and then it ended up with the picture that's the banner on our Twitter feed where Spuddy had one model running away from almost my entire army. Felt like that was how Warhammer was meant to be played. It was just fantastic, off the chart fun, awesome. But then at tournaments, I've had great times as well. I played both 7th edition games actually. Really, really enjoyed. At the first gathering I went to, Aegon 2, I played Darren Palmer from Northwest Gaming Centre. He had, which is to be honest, for a 1500 point game of 7th edition, utter filth, because he brought Dogs of War, who could have a dragon, because they could have a Sign or the Dragon Lord as a rare choice. No one else could have a dragon at 1500 points in 7th edition. And there was a spot prize. There's still spot prizes in Aegon, but the spot prizes were really good back then. They were battalion boxes, not blister packs. And it got to the last game of the tournament, met each other, but realised the spot prize was kill your opponent's most expensive model. And we knew that we couldn't win the tournament and weren't really bothered. So the deployment was, we said, shall we have this prize then? Yeah. My tree man went down. Darren's dragon went down. Everything else was deployed in a blob on one side of the table because we didn't have time for proper deployment. It's like, it's there, go! And we just ran at each other. I managed, he didn't quite make it. I got the charge. Tree man killed the Dragon Lord. And then we looked and thought, okay, well, should we play the rest of the game then? Looking down at units facing backwards, deployed blocks behind other units facing in the wrong way, thinking, all right, let's try and untangle this then. And that was fantastic. I really enjoyed that because that was in the right spirit. My first game against Tris Buckroyd was also in 7th edition at a campaign weekend for Warhammer. And he had brought the old Drycha Forest Spirit list where everything kind of deep strikes in through forests, provided Drychas alive. And I had my 7th edition ogres who were poor. 7th edition ogres were bad. It was an
units
uphill
of 3
struggle.
everywhere, weren't they?
Yeah. The ogre internet community celebrated when someone came third at the Grand Tournament Heat with them, because that was the best result we'd ever seen for ogres. And Wood Elves in 7th were considered bent as hell. Yeah. Wood Elves versus ogres was one of the hardest matchups for ogres because they couldn't cope with all their movement tricks. And in the first turn, I hit Drycha with a Bone Cruncher magic missile, killed Drycha, and then nothing else of Tris's could appear, and that was it then. I'd killed one model and his whole army was stuck off the table. And it was just this really weird... The game was over in like 5 minutes, but we both had a laugh because none of us... I didn't think I'd kill her. He didn't see it coming at all. It was really nice, really good game, and then we just brought everything of his on and played the rest of it anyway. And I guess finally, the first game of 7th edition 40k I played with Dave, actually, who's asked this question when we played the tactical objective cards for the first time. And that was one of the most fun things I've ever had playing any war game ever. That was just an utter laugh all the way through using the tactical objective cards.
Yeah, the tactical objective cards are great.
Yeah. I can tell you my worst game.
James skirted around that one.
Yeah.
Back to us.
Well, this is because
I can have a think, but I mean, it could be any of the 300 times I've played Daz. Really,
it was a long time ago. I don't remember the person's name, but it was no reflection on them. It was the last Grand Tournament final at Warhammer World before it became the Throne of Skulls we know now. Back with the old 3 heats and then a tournament final. I'd qualified through the heats by getting nominated for Best Painted, so I already wasn't good enough to be there to win it. And I took a slightly softer Wood Elf army because I wanted to use my Forest Dragon, because I really liked my Forest Dragon and I'd never got to use it. And in 7th edition Warhammer, what this meant was I had my maximum of 2 dispel dice every turn. That's all I could use to dispel with. And first, I thought if I come up against a magic heavy army, I'll get beaten, go down the bottom tables, and just play like-minded people. And I got matched up against a 15 power dice vampire count army who murdered me. I couldn't stop them. I had no answer to their wraiths and magical ethereal stuff killing me. I couldn't stop the 15 units of things being raised every turn. I got hammered. Went down to kind of middle tables and played Adam Turner, who was one of the guys behind Aegon, who had exactly the same vampire counts army, who did exactly the same thing to me. To be honest, every game against Adam is absolute blast. He's a really nice guy to play. So I wasn't upset at this point. I had a great time, got hammered, I killed his BSB. That was the only model I killed, and we rejoiced at that one guy who got killed by running, only because he ran him into a wood out of charity so I could cast Tree Singing on him. Got hammered again, went down, and by the 6th game at this tournament, where I'd played 6 identical vampire counts armies, they matched up against this guy on the very bottom table. I was in last place against the person in second to last place, thinking, how the hell are you here? I understand why I'm here. How have you brought this and got here? Yeah. And I got hammered again, and I hated it. I was bored stupid. It put me off Warhammer for a while, put me off going back to a tournament environment like that, because I'd had 6 increasingly dismal games where the same thing happened. I mean, that's kind of one of the hallmarks of 7th edition. The same thing tend to happen to you
I remember the whole
all the time.
if you were outnumbered by fear causing things, you fled automatically and all that stuff. From
Yeah.
7th edition.
Was it because
I
there was a
noticed
lot of vampire armies there that were the same, or was there sort of 6 or 7 of them and you just...
I just hit all
you
of
just
them.
hit all, right, yeah.
It was the tail end of 7th edition, so 90%
Dark
of the
elves,
field was
demons, vampires.
vampires.
Yeah.
And all the vampires tended to be built around this 15 power dice casting,
Yeah.
15 dice phase, and I couldn't stop it. And I knew that was a weakness in my list. I knew that was the rock to my scissors. I just didn't expect to get beaten over the head with 6 identical friggin' rocks.
Yeah.
And it's no reflection on my opponent. I'm sure he was a nice guy. Honestly, I don't remember. I don't remember what his army looked like. I don't remember which of the ones that blurred into one he was. I just remember at that point thinking, oh my god, I can't believe I've come all this way for this. On my own. I didn't have any other friends there with me, really. I just want to pack up and go home now. It's really miserable.
I will give my worst game. And much like Dan, I've played him a couple of times and it's not a reflection on him. But I won Aegon with my Bretts, and then I went back 6 months after as reigning champ, thinking, right,
I've done this. Yeah,
I've done this.
Yeah.
Let's just try and put another solid performance in my Bretonians. And round 1, I got Darren Palmer, who's Northwest Gaming Centre. Get on with him well as a person, so it's like I say, not a reflection on him. He brought a dwarf gun line that still had wet wash on it because he was still
He was still washing it that morning.
He was still
And
washing it that
Grim
morning.
Burlockson and about,
It was like Grim Burlockson and some things,
Like
and it
10
was
war machines
about
and
10
stuff.
war machines, max war machines basically. Gun line. I'm playing Bretonians, so we got meeting engagement. I think it was. So I lined up on the line with all my lances. He lined up right in the corner, and I thought, right, I can't pray because he gets first turn and I die. So I didn't pray, and he rolled the 6.
For anyone who didn't play that game, it means he still got to go first, and James was denied his magical protection against War Machine.
So by sort of my turn 1, I'd probably lost a third of my army. I marched forward. By my turn 2, I'd lost 2/3 of the army. I marched to within charge range of his war machines, and then he killed the rest of it. And that was pretty much it. And it was just horrible. I mean, even with the ward save, I would have been absolutely mullered. But it was just that one dice roll has never upset me so much.
Neil?
Probably my best game, certainly of Warhammer, was the last game of the first Aegon after the Warrior Chaos came out. I ended up
where you had nothing but chimeras
And Demon Princes.
well, yeah. I ended up on the last game was Battle for the Pass, which is the same one that James was just talking about, where you are the long way deployed against each other. I was up against a dwarf gun line, which Warriors of Chaos don't like dwarf gun lines. They certainly don't like dwarf gun lines when there's potentially at least 4 foot table they've got to get through before they get to the dwarfs. I was up against Big Ed, and I was about...
Big Ed is a master dwarf player, having played nothing but dwarves since the
yeah.
dawn of time.
Yeah. And I looked at, I think it was like table 4 or 5, so I was like, I could cast, I looked at it, and we sort of looked at it and went to him, I could castle it all in the corner, and you won't be able to hurt me because the range and the dwarf war machines means that if you stick everything as far back as possible, you'll probably be alright. And I looked and I went, and it will be the most boring game of the weekend. And he went, yeah. And realistically, that's what you're going to do. And I looked and went, I'm going to run at you. I'm going to run at you. I'm going to see what happens, because otherwise we're not going to have a game. And I managed to get a chimera into a unit of warriors. That was the only thing that made combat. Everything else died. But it was the thing of, we're not going to have a shit game because this is a shit lineup for me. It was, I know it's shit for me. You know it's shit for me. We both know how this is going to win, how this is going to play out, because there's only one way this ever plays out in this particular matchup. You win every time. Well, you either win every time, or
I'm pretty sure I could screw that up. I think I could misfire that.
We don't have a game, and I'm like, I'm going to give you a game, and it was that mindset that made it such a fun. We were there rolling dice, desperately trying to get this demon prince in. I think he managed to ward off a cannon, and it's that type of thing which only really happens when you play with that sort of spirit of the game. You're like, I might have a chance here, oh, that's it, gone.
Yeah.
But that, because of how it was played, was probably one of the best game of Warhammer I've ever played.
Have you got a worst game of any war game?
Something which I've now said that I will never ever do again is when we were at the old club in Headingley. Somebody came along and they sort of put on the forums, my son's really into Warhammer, would 40k, when we give him a game. So I said, I'll give him a game. I think he had Marines and I had Orcs, which isn't a great matchup for Orcs. So we lined up, and I was sort of speaking to his dad and said, this kid's only like 12, and I said to him, look, I'll go easy. I'll just let him. I'm not going to like go all out. I'll just move stuff and let him like shoot me and stuff, so he gets an idea. And you ever have one of those games where everything goes right?
Did he table you?
No, I absolutely. I was just like, when you're like, well, I shouldn't be able to charge it. That was in charge range, and
I've had that. I've had where I'm not trying to throw the game, but I'm aware that I'm playing somebody in a friendly environment, not like a tournament. I'm playing somebody where I could make my army's a really good matchup, and I could make their game miserable.
Yeah.
And I don't want to, so I'll do silly things, and it still went right. I think a time I charged 10 dwarf crossbowmen without great weapons, just 10 dwarf crossbowmen down a hill into 40 storm vermin with a grey seer and a warlord, and I broke them and ran them down. And it's things like that we think, no, this wasn't supposed to happen.
It's one of those games where you play and you roll the dice and you go, I'm really sorry. It's like, you're going, I'd have to roll like 5 6s for this to. There's 6 6s and I only rolled 6 dice. That type of game, and because of that, I did say after that game, I'm never playing to lose again.
Yeah.
Because if you actually genuinely play to lose, the dice gods don't like it.
Plus, nothing makes you look like more of a dick than saying, I'll go easy on you, and then tabling
And then
somebody.
taking somebody.
Especially a child.
Oh, man, that wasn't even bringing my A game. Yeah, go home and cry, child.
For me, my best game, funnily enough, not competitive, so to speak. It was a 40k game, and it was actually one of Dan's campaigns not too long ago. I was using Blood Angels Party Perdition War campaign, Dan. Yeah. And it was what made the game so good was it was.
Was this with the drop pod?
Exactly.
Yes, this was a good game.
And it was me and my opponent were playing the game, and we're playing the whole. It's a campaign. We're playing in the spirit of the game, and basically all I had to do, being Blood Angels, was essentially get over this wall to get me into the city. And we essentially playing the lengthways deployment. I can't remember what they call that, but basically, being Blood Angels, all I had to do was deep strike 6 inches away from the board edge with Descent of Angels, because it was the old book, so basically I couldn't scatter off to the edge, and then run over the line and win. Which obviously makes for a no game. It's totally pointless. So I decided, obviously, to have a bit of banter with it and stuff, and try and run up some guys from the other edge of the board, and I had a couple of things in reserves for the pod. And we just did as Dan had said, and we wrote the story, we created the background, we changed the world, I basically said, what would happen if I put my Dreadnought in this drop pod and basically launched it at the gate? And Dan was like, well, he'll die. He's like, yeah, but what happens to the gate? You'll take it out. What about the things that are on it? Yeah, they'll do this. And we basically just made up a load of rules. At the time, we made up a load of rules basically saying, if this hits and that does that, then this will happen, you'll take that down and this will do it. And my opponent agreed, and we did it. And it hit, and it destroyed it, and this gate collapsed in, and his guardsmen all got blown apart and thing off. But we had a laugh about it. And I can't explain why it was so good, but it's just the fact that little one game we had, I think it was like the second game of the weekend, or maybe even third or whatever.
It was a bit later in.
It was a bit later.
It was a bit later in because I didn't put the gate back on.
No,
that bit of the world was forever tarnished by you using a drop pod as a ballistic missile
from space. Yeah, which is obviously what they're meant for. And we had a laugh with it. And I can't explain, like I said, I can't explain why it was such a good game. It was just the fact that we were going to sound pervy. We were playing with each other rather than playing to win.
You should play with your opponent,
yeah,
not against your
that's
opponent.
what I'm trying to say, yes. We were playing the game together. Yeah, and we were basically, with it being a campaign, trying to forge a narrative.
I think Dan's campaigns, not to blow his trumpet, but your campaigns do that, though. they make you want to play with your opponent.
Yeah, it was the whole thing, like I said, the forging a narrative and stuff, and trying to have some impact on the world for other players. Because what I did in that game did actually affect what happened in 2 other people's games afterwards, because I'd wrecked half the table, and that's how it is. Worst game. Well, I've got one I could talk about, but I'm not going to talk about because
He's here.
He's not.
Yes, well, no, none of us have picked each other for best or worst game.
Yeah.
I genuinely think though you wouldn't, because we play quite often.
Yeah.
So they all they all kind of
I mean, the one with Spuddy stood out because it was 10,000 points.
Yeah. And the one we did because it was the first game of a new system.
Yeah, and we couldn't
new
believe how much
cards.
fun it was.
Yeah, that's it. So it's
Probably the worst game is something more along the lines of Dan's thing. This is a couple of AGOMs ago when I'd gone, and the new Dark Elf filth had just come around, and by pure fluke that weekend I hit 5 Dark Elf avoidance lists.
It was like the week after
the week after,
illegal.
yeah. And it was just like, oh my fucking god. And it was the exact same list 5 times over. And then I think by luck I got Dan in game 6, and it was just like, I don't give a fuck, I'm just going to run at you in the middle and we're going to have a fight. Because I've not actually got anything in combat all weekend long, mate.
Yeah, I just want to roll some dice that aren't armour saves.
Yeah. And I'd spent the entire weekend just being shot and blasted and taking my own stuff off and never actually getting into combat with anything. And
I think the same thing. I decided not to fire the hell cannon and run it at you.
Yeah, it was literally we just ran into the middle and played Warhammer Tetris, as you said, and just threw a dice. I lost horribly the entire weekend, but it was just that type of list because it was current in filth, and it was that. I know that people say, Warhammer wasn't balanced and points are balanced and stuff. It wasn't. It was the same list. And this is what I'm hoping Age of Sigmar gets away from, is the fact that people won't take the exact same list.
Well I'm worried about the formations giving you bonuses, because if the formations start giving you too good a bonus, like some of them do in 40k, you will get the same lists.
Yeah. I don't know though. I think what's going to force people to do the same list in Age of Sigmar is the possibly antiquated ideal that you have to bring warriors of Chaos army. You have to bring an army where they all a Lizardman army where they all share the same War Scroll battalion. Whereas if you just say I'm bringing an Order army, there's so much variety that the odds of someone bringing identical lists are ridiculously slim.
Yeah. But it was just that weekend. Like I said, I hate Warlocks. I hate Marathi. I hate that. Yeah, it wasn't.
It's fun. When you've got to play this. Some armies are just bad matchups for your armies, and having to play that army 5-6 times in a row kills your spirit. And I suppose that's what Warmachine's 2 army list approach to its tournaments is trying to avoid.
Which is what we've not been.
Yeah, if you saw yourself playing against someone who's got another Dark Elf army, then you just think at that point, right, I won't put down the combat brick that's going to spend the whole game not getting in a fight.
So it's like you said, you can't build an all-comers list in Warmachine, but you can build an all-comers 2 caster list. That's what a lot of Warmachine is, trying to cover the weaknesses of one of your casters with what's in the other list. So there's that whole side of it, but
that was it, and not good.
No, it's kind of thanks, Dave. You've left us on a really miserable point.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. You wanker.
We're all now, shit, isn't it?
Glad Warhammer's
everybody hates.
Anyway.
Isn't it amazing that Warlocks are dead?
Isn't it amazing that Warlocks are actually that good in this edition?
The best thing about Age of Sigmar, Warlocks aren't what they were.
Yay.
I do actually think that the main reason they had to rewrite Warhammer 8th edition is because of the Dark Elf book. Not so much because of the book, because they looked at the way people were playing it and went, that's not what we meant.
No, Dark
Please
Elf,
stop.
Sorry. What they're called? Exiles in Age of Sigmar. They're actually a lot more combat based. They don't have the shooty options as much anymore. They are pretty much elves that do combat. Yeah. Which is what they should have been. Yeah. But
that's what the whole game should have been. It was trying to simulate ancient combat, which used missile weaponry for support, for driving people back, but not spend the entire battle running around behind you on my horse shooting you like Mongols did that.
Can I just, while I'm on it as well, with this whole Dark Elf, what annoyed me about them Dark Elf avoidance lists was, I think out of the 5 ones I played, 4 of them were just randomly teleporting fast cavalry 20 inches without actually measuring the guys at the back and stuff.
Yeah,
I'm not the fast cavalry, they can just move wherever they want, honest.
Yeah, I'm not sorry that's gone. The misunderstanding of how a free reform still requires you to follow the rules for reforming and not magically just pick them up and put them down where the hell you wanted.
Yeah, and it was just trying to explain that to 4 different people that weekend, and them all arguing it with me because obviously they play Dark Elves, they knew how to do it. Yeah, anyway, I'm ranting.
Yeah, fuck Dark Elves.
I play Bretonians. Nobody once moaned about my mounted yeoman getting very refurbished.
I think we need like a happier thing.
Pick me up.
We need to pick me up.
Yeah.
We've got no more questions though. Maybe one of us should ask a question.
We need like a picture of a kitten or something now to end with, don't we? To
Well,
bring
on
us back
radio.
round.
Come on, has anybody asked a question whilst we've been recording the podcast? Please help us.
I think that's
So
it.
on that bombshell.
Yeah, on a bombshell. It's been a pleasure, guys. Ta-ta.
Yeah, keep an eye on the blog and on the website for people's pictures of the models for the Breath of the Mountain and for the story developing. We will touch on it again in some future episodes. Thanks for listening.
Yeah,
Yeah, thanks for listening.